Chapter 1488. After messing around for a while, the recording was finally about to begin. The fathers stood in a row. Yang Guo, Lu Yi and Hu Jun, the three long-legged men, led the way, while Zhou Shimin and Lin Yongjian, the two capable fresh meat, stood in the middle. It was like a luxurious and aged version of a handsome group. The main thing was their temperament. The five of them present were all successful people in their own fields. Even Poplar Fruit had a maturity that exceeded his age. The most important thing was the gentle smile that they gave their children. It was enough to charm 99% of the female viewers in front of their televisions. There was no other way. The guests chosen for "Where are we going, Daddy?" were all good male celebrities. This was where their advantage lay. The camera panned down. There were four cute and handsome young men, as well as a beautiful and well-behaved young lady. After Kiki put on that elegant and exquisite princess dress, she became a lady. If the previous program was said to make everyone laugh, then the latter program was purely pleasing to the eyes. The men were handsome, and the women were beautiful. Every scene, if taken separately, was a poster that people could not get enough of. The program did not give everyone much time to take screenshots or lick the screen. This was because the village chief then told everyone that he had prepared a huge surprise for the dads and the children. Although this was no longer a secret, and the program's preview had also revealed some of the later scenes, even the dads present looked longingly at the wooden house. Who would be the first to walk out? Real music started playing. It was not the kind of music that came with Kiki's appearance, but a real orchestra sitting in a small pavilion by the side. They were using cellos, violins, and even accordions to play. Could it be Mama Ma? Kiki moved. She wanted to ask her dads, but she remembered that the village chief had said that spoilers were not to be revealed, so she could only hold it back. The opaque glass door was pushed open and two people walked out holding hands. The camera panned up, as if the curtains were slowly being lifted. Of the two beauties, the older one was wearing a dark-colored evening gown. She had a graceful and dignified posture, while the younger one was wearing a dark green silk dress. She was slim and elegant. It was Hu Jun's wife and daughter. When Lu Fang and Jiu walked out of the wooden house, Kong Kong screamed. She immediately ran back behind her father, and only dared to stick her head out to look. The changes were too big. Just a moment ago, they appeared in the villa in casual clothes. Now Mama and Jiu were dressed so beautifully. They even had a noble aura, which made Kong Kong unable to adapt. "Kong, come." Hu Jun held a rose and patted Kong Kong's shoulder. But after taking 2 steps, he realized that Kong Kong was too embarrassed to come up. "Mama Ma, Jiu said. Mama Kong Kong gij to tu. Jiu. To at that moment. Kong Kong seemed to be affected by her homesickness. When she saw her mother and sister dressed so beautifully, she shrank back. "Kong Kong." Jiu smiled and waved at Kong Kong. Jiu was only 14 years old, but she was as beautiful as a 17 or 18-year-old girl. Hu Jun must have brought her to see the world. She was cheerful and generous, unlike a 14-year-old girl. Hearing her sister's call, Kong Kong finally ran over. The family smiled and hugged each other. Lu Fang and Jiu's appearance surprised the audience. Jiu, who had always been well protected by Hu Jun, was the focus of the audience. The fathers present were also full of praise. Compared to Kiki, who was still a mini beauty, Jiu was really the kind of girl next door who had just grown up. Didn't they see Zhou Shimin laughing and saying that she and her mother looked like sisters standing together? They were about the same height, and their appearance was even better. Especially after she put on makeup and changed into a cheongsam. She really attracted the attention of all the men present. Thus, the little girl suddenly felt that she was being neglected. Kiki pouted and shook her father's clothes. When her father put his hand down and pressed it on her shoulder, the little girl grabbed her father's hand. She was a little jealous. Although she only felt that she was being neglected by her father, she couldn't tolerate it. How could her father think that other sisters were more beautiful than Kiki? Even the photographer didn't notice that Kiki grabbed her father's hand to stop him from taking photos, but Poplar Fruit immediately understood. How could a father not understand his daughter's thoughts? Poplar Fruit laughed in surprise. He lowered his head and covered the microphone with his hand. He smiled and said in his daughter's ear, "It's okay, You'll be more beautiful when you grow up. Although it was only a promise of the future, after her father finished speaking, Kiki also beamed with joy. She was a girl after all. How could she not care about her position in the eyes of the people she cared about? Even if Kiki said that she wasn't the prettiest girl in kindergarten, she would at least hope that her father would think that she was the prettiest and cutest among her peers. Jun's family waited by the side. The second group of guests was about to appear. This time, without the village chief's reminder, everyone clapped hard, looking forward to the next mother's arrival. The audience was also looking forward to it. At this moment, they were like farmers who had dug up a piece of ore. They were pleasantly surprised to find that other than the fathers and children, there was also such an eye-catching family member. Especially the male audience, when they saw Jiu, their attention was immediately focused. They saw the door being pushed open and two beauties stood at the door. Of course this time, it was really one big and one small. Unlike Lu Feng, who had the grace of a Chinese woman, Lu Ye's French wife, Anna, had the romantic and classical aura of a French beauty. Her clothes were very simple. She wore a short-sleeved pure white t-shirt without any prints. The hem of her shirt was completely tucked into a beige straight skirt. A slightly darker apricot-colored belt was tied around her waist like a dividing line. Although it was very simple, it matched perfectly. Not only did it show off her graceful figure, it also accentuated her elegant temperament. Anna was like a flower on a flower stand on both sides, stunning the entire screen. As for the little beauty Nina, who was beside her, she wore pantyhose, a long skirt and a classical jacket. She looked slightly reserved, but she was also exquisite and charming. Just like her mother, Nina was wearing a headband. Of course, her headband had a pair of cute bows hanging out of her hair, which made her slightly nervous smile even more adorable. Chapter 1489. It seemed like when Kong Kong was too embarrassed to go forward, Nui was also in the group laughing. But now, it was his turn to not dare to go forward. The little boy giggled and hid behind poplar fruit. On the other hand, after Lu Yi called out to Nui, he could not hold back the joy in his heart. He took the flowers from the village chief and strode forward. Nui, quickly go up. Everyone laughed and urged Nui. Kong Kong was relieved and had forgotten that she was in such a predicament as well. She shouted, Nui, quickly go and find your sister. Unknowingly, Kong Kong had placed a product placement advertisement for a famous mobile game. Of course, it was unintentional. Lu Yi ignored him. He walked directly to his French wife. The two of them looked at each other, and their smiles reflected each other's eyes. They were also full of love. Lu Yi, on the other hand, did something that made everyone exclaim without any warning. Oh! Lu Yi hugged Anna's face and tilted his head to kiss her. Anna also stood on her tiptoes. After all, Anna was not tall but Lu Yi was 186 meters tall. The moment his parents kissed, Nui stood beside poplar fruit and giggled foolishly. His face was red and he almost did not cover his eyes. In comparison, parents nowadays were much more open. Poplar Fruit remembered that when he was young, whenever there was a kissing scene on TV, his parents would make him turn his head away. As for Kiki, she had been exposed to Western culture since she was young. Naturally, she would not find such a thing embarrassing. The little girl turned her head and shook her father's hand. She said, Daddy, later you have to kiss Mama too. Poplar Fruit laughed and resisted the urge to rub the little girl's head. He could not ruin Kiki's hairstyle and princess crown. He said, of course. After Lu Yi and Anna finished showing off their love, Nui was pushed out by everyone. He held hands with his parents and sister and laughed happily together. Of course, Nina was the happiest at this moment because her father could finally hug her. Nina was still at the age of pestering her father. Lu Yi and his family returned to their seats. Although Kong Kong was still bouncing around and interacting intimately with little sister Nina, they were finally going to welcome a new group of guests. Could it be Zhou Shimon's wife and youngest son, who were also a family of 4? The door opened. No, it was just as graceful and beautiful. A woman in a black gauze dress walked out of the door. Her slightly aged face didn't make her already beautiful face pale. Instead, it added a lot of elegance to her. She was Lin Yongjian's wife, Jun's mother, and a famous TV drama actress Zhou Dongqi. Lin Yongjian was still pretending to be calm and waiting for his wife to come up. In the end, Dejun, who had been peeking from side to side, couldn't hold back anymore. He directly turned around between his father's legs and quickly ran to his mother's side. "Mommy, I love you," Dejun said as he was hugged in his mother's arms. It was unknown how many people in the audience were touched. It could be said that although Dejun wasn't the most popular among the 5 children, he was the one who had grown the most. Thinking back to the first time they had met, he had called her father a devil and talked back to her in all sorts of ways. But now his personality was as gentle as spring water. Although it was not warm enough, it was enough to make people like him. At this moment, Lin Yongjian affectionately walked up with a rose in his hand. But halfway there, Hu Jun, who was full of tricks, jested, "Stop acting, stop acting. Be more sincere at a time like this." It sounded like a piece of advice, but why did he say it so loudly? Why did he sound like he was trying to hold back his laughter? Everyone burst into laughter. The atmosphere created by Lin Yongjian was instantly broken. When Lin Yongjian, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry, was ready to express his feelings again, Dejun came back and snatched the flower from his father's hand and gave it to his mother. His strength was truly a scam. Fortunately, the atmosphere wasn't ruined this time. Lin Yongjian and his wife stood together. However, the relatively conservative Lin Yongjian and his wife couldn't let go in front of so many people. "Kiss her, kiss her." Lin Yongjian only kissed his wife lightly after everyone cheered him on, or urged him to do something that was beyond his ability. Although it wasn't as romantic as the previous 2 couples, the deep affection between an old couple holding hands was still somewhat enviable. And in the melodious sound of the violin, Lin Yongjian and Zhou Dongqi's impromptu dance made people see some of the deeper feelings between them. Of course, if Dejun wasn't rolling freely on the grass at the side, this scene would be even more intoxicating. The next one disappointed Kiki. The one who walked out of the door wasn't Fang Beibei, but Ran Yingying, who walked out like a flower fairy, and Hao Hao, who was in her arms. "It's okay, your mother is the finale." Poplar Fruit smiled and comforted the little girl in a low voice. She had looked forward to it 4 times in vain. It wasn't unreasonable for Ran Yingying to let the group of mothers call out to the flower fairy. She wore a pink dress, the pleated skirt was like a blooming flower, and the crystal-inlaid part was as beautiful as the morning dew hanging on the stamen. Of course, Hao Hao was calmly eating his lollipop. In his mother's arms, he didn't care about the outside world at all. Xian, who was looking forward to his mother's embrace, rushed forward and broke Zhou Shimen's plan. He could only go to the village chief to get the flower. Just as Xian and his mother were tightly hugging, the village chief suddenly exclaimed. She saw Zhou Shimen holding the rose in his mouth, like a Western matador dancing, swaying left and right as he walked up the stage. But Ran Yingying and Xian were still hugging. No one noticed. No, it should be said that Hao Hao saw it. He looked at his father in confusion, but he didn't understand what his father was doing at all. Of course, Zhou Shimen was still very strong and continued his solo dance. Even if he was ignored at first, and then when Xian and Hao Hao passed by, he still walked up to his wife with determination. Finally, the bleak prelude was over. Xian and Hao Hao ran to the side to play, leaving only Hao Hao to present the rose in a very gentlemanly manner. In fact, no one heard what they were saying, but they saw Zhou Shimen stride forward, one hand holding Ran Yingying's waist, as if he was hugging her, the other hand gently pressed on her shoulder. What a beautiful turn! Ran Yingying was pleasantly surprised as Zhou Shimen held her waist and hugged her in the air. Zhou Shimen's hand, which was originally pressing on her shoulder, now wrapped around Ran Yingying's back and hugged her tightly. Then he lowered his head and kissed her intimately. It was so romantic. However, the fathers in front had used up all their tricks. What was Poplar Fruit going to do? Chapter 1490. Cowboy Zhou Shimen brought his flower fairy wife back to the crowd, and the impatient children started playing hide and seek. Now, only the father and daughter pair of Poplar Fruit and Kiki were left waiting. Kiki was a little anxious. She stood straight and her body swayed a little, but soon she calmed down, because her father's big hands gently pressed on her 2 small arms. Although the sun was gently shining, the wind was still a little cold. Her father's big hands wrapped around Kiki's small arms, which were exposed to the air, and immediately isolated the cold air. The little girl's jade skin also became warm. Finally, the door opened again. Kiki and Poplar Fruit both raised their heads and looked over, full of anticipation. In their field of vision, it was as if a ray of bright sunlight poured in. Fong Beibei walked over gracefully. Although the egg-yellow dress that covered her knees was a little out of Poplar Fruit's expectations, he had thought that Fong Beibei would wear a wedding dress. It instantly pulled Poplar Fruit into a distant memory. The girl in front of him was wearing white high-heeled sandals, and her jade feet were as moving as pearls. Above her slender ankles, she was wearing a pure egg-yellow dress. The hem of the dress fluttered slightly, as if it brought with it the fragrance of the summer lotus pond. The girl's pretty face was slightly red. Amidst the cheers of the crowd, under the gaze of the person she loved, she was a little shy. She gently nodded her head, and the white wide-brimmed sun hat covered the red clouds. Ma. Kiki ran up happily and hugged Fong Beibei while giggling. Poplar Fruit was still in the same place, looking at them with a smile. He was actually a little lost in thought. Fong Beibei's outfit was out of his expectations, and it also made him instantly recall the scene when they first met. At that time, wasn't Fong Beibei dressed like this? Blocking out the surrounding noise, Poplar Fruit seemed to have returned to the lakeside. He looked affectionately at the girl in front of him, who seemed to have become the most beautiful scenery in midsummer. Then, as if she sensed something, she looked up and responded with a smile that was brighter than the sun. This smile was in no way inferior to the one Fong Beibei had given him back then. Of course, there was no surprise like before. After living together for many years, the two had become the most familiar with each other. However, Poplar Fruit could not help but feel the rush of excitement from back then. Yes, at that time, there was already a faint feeling of love growing in the bottom of his heart, but at that time, he was still in the period of a blank window, and had not even walked out of the sadness of being heartbroken, so he ignored a lot of feelings that he should have understood. But now he found it again. Back then he was indeed moved. This feeling was exactly the same as what he was thinking right now. I want to marry this woman. Amazing, right? Yes, at that time, the idea in his mind was to marry no one else but her. Or to put it another way, he fell in love with Fong Beibei at first sight. This feeling was very mysterious. It was as if he recognized this woman as his other half from the first time he met her. No wonder Poplar Fruit had a kind of uncontrollable joy when he met Fong Beibei again at the stray dog rescue station after half a year. No wonder he was so nervous when Fong Beibei visited her for the first time. No wonder he was jealous when he saw Fong Beibei being confessed to, which led to him rushing to confess. Of course, there were some changes in his feelings now. Fong Beibei was already his wife. That kind of ignorant heartbeat had become a kind of calm heartbeat. The woman I fell in love with is so beautiful. Poplar Fruit wanted to do a lot of things at the moment, but all of them were to go up to her, give her the flowers in his hand, and thank her for accompanying him along the way. So, Poplar Fruit gradually returned to reality from his memories. The past merged with the present. The fathers next to him urged him, "Poplar Fruit, go quickly. What are you waiting for?" Poplar Fruit suddenly smiled brightly. He strode forward, and his steps were very steady. Fong Beibei, who had just bent down to hug Kiki, also straightened her back at the right time. Kiki was very obedient and turned sideways to make room for her father. In the end, his child was sensible. She was not like Dejun and Xian, who intentionally or unintentionally dominated their mother, and made their father a joke. At that moment, Kiki was temporarily ignored by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit came in front of Fong Beibei, lowered his head, and looked into her eyes. His eyes reflected her smiling eyes, and from their gazes, she could feel the strong love. It seemed that the hat was a little blocking their view. Because Poplar Fruit was tall, Fong Beibei needed to raise her head high to see Poplar Fruit's face over the brim of the hat. She was about to push the hat behind her back. "You don't have to take off the hat," Poplar Fruit said gently. He put the flower on Fong Beibei's hat, and used the white silk ornament to clip it. Looking at it this way, the fiery red rose and the pure white hat added a touch of charm to the beauty of the beauty. After he was done, Fong Beibei's face blushed even more. Poplar Fruit's big hand pulled her into his embrace. Kiss, kiss. The audience around them were not satisfied, and they shouted. Poplar Fruit turned to look at them, and then lowered his head to look at Fong Beibei, who was happily leaning in his arms. The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Although the two of them were not the kind of people who liked to show their affection in public, Fong Beibei was not too shy. She had already stood up straight, ready to receive Poplar Fruit's hot kiss. However, Poplar Fruit suddenly used strength in his hands, and Fong Beibei exclaimed softly as Poplar Fruit picked her up. It was not a princess carry, but the kind where his arms were around her knees. He directly used his great strength to lift Fong Beibei vertically and held her to his chest. All of a sudden, Fong Beibei seemed to be sitting on an elevator, and her knees were pressed against Poplar Fruit's chest. At this moment, she seemed to be half a head taller than Poplar Fruit. She did not react in time and quickly hugged Poplar Fruit's neck with both hands. Oh! The fathers beside them were very cooperative and shouted, "What's going on?" Of course, it was a last-minute idea that Poplar Fruit came up with. Although he didn't say any sweet nothings, his actions showed the gentleness of a man. At this moment he was slightly domineering for once. He let Fong Beibei get on the lift and lifted her up high like a child. Although they did not communicate beforehand, Fong Beibei seemed to tacitly understand Poplar Fruit's intention of carrying her. Fong Beibei smiled faintly and sweetly, and her slender hand tucked some naughty hair behind her ear. Then, she lowered her beautiful face and kissed Poplar Fruit's lips. In the past, Poplar Fruit was the one who took the initiative. This time, Poplar Fruit let Fong Beibei switch to the upper position. The unexpected kissing posture added a lot of love and interest. Chapter 1491. No wonder Poplar Fruit said that there was no need to take off the hat. Now Fong Beibei lowered her head while Poplar Fruit raised his head to kiss. From top to bottom, the wide-brimmed sun hat was naturally not an obstacle. But it was hard on the cameraman. The two cameramen circled around the two of them, and almost could not find a suitable camera position because of the hat. Under the rotating camera position, this shot was as beautiful as a painting. Fong Beibei was carried high up in Poplar Fruit's arms. Her eyes were filled with happiness. When the female viewers in front of their televisions saw Fong Beibei being picked up, their eyes sparkled like stars. They were about to flood the place. I also want to have such a handsome and strong boyfriend. I also want to be held high by him. I also want to be a woman on top. What the hell? It seemed like the female netizens' breakdown was getting worse and worse. Back at the recording studio, Fong Beibei's arms were originally wrapped around Poplar Fruit's neck, because she was a little scared when she was carried. But hugging his neck was a little unnatural. Fong Beibei kissed and slowly found a suitable position. Both of her hands were cupping Poplar Fruit's face. One of her fingers was inserted into Poplar Fruit's hair, while the other hand was gently caressing Poplar Fruit's handsome face. So romantic. Anna laughed at Lu Yi. She was a Frenchwoman, so she understood Fong Beibei's almost unconscious actions very well. Weren't some of the romantic actions that Frenchmen used to express their love in French literature films all very intimate? Not only was the action romantic, this kiss was also like a romantic French kiss. It was as if Fong Beibei's attachment to Poplar Fruit and Poplar Fruit's love for Fong Beibei were poured into it. Although it did not reach the level of sticking out their tongues, the two of them kissed for almost a minute. If they were not being watched and there were so many children there, the two of them might have kissed until the end of time. Fong Beibei took the initiative to use one hand to support Poplar Fruit's shoulder blade, and raised her head. Her cheeks were rosy, like apples that had ripened in autumn. Perhaps it was because she was shy, or perhaps it was because she was a little breathless from the kiss, but she pursed her lips and smiled. "Baby, you're so beautiful today," Poplar Fruit said affectionately. His voice was not loud and the audience could hear it because of the microphone. However, it did not give the surrounding fathers a chance to jeer. "I love you." "I love you too." Fong Beibei was a little infatuated with Poplar Fruit's handsome face, and replied sweetly. The audience was also drunk. Some of them were intoxicated by these two sweet words, while some of them were sad and drunk because they were single and had received a critical hit. "I love you guys too." Kiki, who was left out at the side, could not help but steal the limelight. The little girl jumped up and down happily, temporarily forgetting her ladylike demeanor as a princess. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were pulled back from their two-person world by Kiki. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, but did not continue to linger. Fong Beibei was gently put down by Poplar Fruit. She bent down, hugged Kiki in her arms, and then gently kissed Kiki's face. Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit also very tacitly came over from the other side and kissed Kiki's tender face from both sides. At this moment, the romantic atmosphere became warm. This is the taste of home. Isn't this the change from love to family? Amidst everyone's applause, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei completed their family's first performance. The little rascal could finally happily return to her group of friends. Next, it was time for the dance. The orchestra in the small pavilion began their performance again. Everyone happily danced. Poplar Fruit held Fong Beibei's hand. Lu Yi and Anna, Zhou Shimin and Ran Yingying, Lin Yongjian and Zhou Dongqi were all couples. But Hu Jun's family was more fun. Hu Jun and his daughter danced, while Lu Fong bent down and held Kong Kong's hand. It was quite interesting. When it came to dancing, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei did not dance as well as the other couples. Lu Yi and Anna had a great tacit understanding. The two of them could perform a little of any dance, as if they had practiced together for decades. Because of Zhou Shimin and Ran Yingying's height problem, Zhou Shimin was not even as tall as his wife, who wore high heels, so it was somewhat awkward. But when they changed into an impromptu tango dance, their performance was very eye-catching. In comparison, Lin Yongjian and Zhou Dongqi lacked novelty. They danced a very classical ballroom dance. The audience, who liked this kind of grand and elegant dance, were very happy. Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei also tried their best to dance. But they were, after all, students. In the ivory tower, they had almost never come into contact with dancing situations. Those small student dances did not even count. Although Fong Beibei was a multi-talented cadre in the student council, her talents were in singing and playing the guitar. As for dancing, she had only learned a little when she was young. She had long forgotten it. Poplar Fruit did not need to be mentioned. This fellow did not have any artistic talent at all. The only dance he knew was the Tai Chi dance that he had secretly learned from Chen Anlin, as well as the Thomas twist of the street dance. He could dance very well just by relying on his arm and waist strength, but these were not suitable for this occasion. Then what should he do? Poplar Fruit had an idea. He withdrew his hands and gently swayed them in front of his body. Then he twisted his tall body and moved back and forth. It was a bit like cha-cha. Poplar Fruit had only seen this kind of dance on TV. He did not know what it was called, but it was more commonly seen in American balls. Fong Beibei looked at Poplar Fruit with a smile. She and Poplar Fruit did not need to speak. They understood each other's meaning with their eyes. She also imitated Poplar Fruit's posture. She followed Poplar Fruit's movements and twisted her light body and stepped back and forth. The single audience members who had fainted from sadness slowly woke up. They looked at the screen and angrily cursed. Fuck fancy PDA, is there any justice in this world? Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were seen moving back and forth in tacit understanding. The seemingly simple dance steps were very pleasing to the eye. It was not the dance steps that were pleasing to the eye. It was because the two of them did not need to lower their heads to look. When one of their feet stepped back, the other's feet stepped forward at the same time. Back and forth. It was like the gears in a fine industrial production line. Although the sizes were different, the operation was surprisingly compatible. Their gently twisting postures and smiling eyes gazing at each other. It was like a pair of butterflies flapping their beautiful wings in spring. Their tacit understanding was amazing. Their tacit understanding was amazing. Of course, the camera would not always be on Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. The little guys next to them were playing together. They were even learning to dance like the adults. That would be a new and interesting sight. Chapter 1492. As soon as the music started to play, the children were already having a great time playing together. First, Dejun was rolling around on the grass. Then Nuyi and Xianxian were hugging each other. Only Kiki was holding Nina's hand. My daughter and Nina, who had been very close on the previous two trips, were standing on one side like two young white poplars that had just sprouted. However, when the music started, my daughter and Nina couldn't help but join in the fun. Girls can't be kept at home when they're of age. While the netizens were sighing, there were also those who were walking away who didn't understand. But they weren't talking about Kiki. After dancing with his mother for a while, Kong Kong went back to his friends. As soon as he turned around, he saw Nina, who was standing quietly on the side, grinning without saying anything. Kiki, who was standing next to Nina, was ignored. Well, it couldn't be helped. After all, Kong Kong had said before that he liked quiet girls. Nina and Kiki were also dancing to the music. However, Kiki was more lively and tried to imitate the actions of adults. Nina was more restrained, but she was still waving her little hands. She looked a little clumsy, but she was still very cute. Kong Kong walked over and held out his hand. Nina, let's play together, okay? Kiki hadn't noticed yet. Nina smiled happily and put her hand in brother Kong Kong's hand. Like a young couple, the two of them walked hand in hand on the side of the road. Of course, it wasn't just a walk. Kong Kong seemed to have a natural affinity with Nina. Every time he did something that wasn't too exaggerated, such as when he raised his back leg and supported himself on one leg, Nina would smile happily and even clap her hands. When Kiki turned around, brother Kong Kong had already walked away with his friends. She was a little confused, but Nui quickly ran over to fill the void beside her. Kiki, let's dance, Nui said with a smile. He seemed to have had enough fun with Xian Xian and wanted to change partners. Xian Xian wasn't left alone either. Dejun rolled around on the ground with him as if they were wrestling, laughing foolishly and cheerfully. The only one who didn't have his own dance partner was Hao Hao. Hao Hao was too young. He couldn't integrate into the world of big brothers and sisters, but he was quickly carried over by his parents. Okay, hee, but I'm wearing a skirt now, so it's not convenient for me to dance. Kiki happily agreed, but immediately realized the problem. Why wasn't she active before? Wasn't it because she was restrained by her clothes? Wearing such a beautiful princess dress that was as white as a lotus, the layers of lace were like blooming petals. How could Kiki bear to roll around on the ground in this dress like Dejun and Nui? Kiki would feel distress for half a day even if it left a shallow mark on the grass, let alone being stained with sand. Then what should we do? Nui scratched his head anxiously as if this was a big deal, but he pushed the question back. What are you afraid of? Wash it if it's dirty. It's not like there's no washing machine. Dejun and Xianxian just happened to roll nearby. Dejun heard it and said indifferently, his tone was like a little adult. Xianxian and Dejun made the biggest noise. The two of them actually planned to dance properly from the beginning. Dejun even deliberately imitated his father's movements. His right hand hugged Xianxian's waist, and his left hand pulled Xianxian's chubby little hand and shook it. The posture of a social dance was quite decent. However, Xianxian seemed to have misunderstood. Xianxian suddenly gave Dejun a hug, and the two of them rolled on the ground. Aya Xianxian, it's not like that. Ha 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 ha. Dejun first complained, but he didn't know why he couldn't stop laughing. Therefore, their ballroom dance turned into a wrestling dance, which was quite fun. Anyway, as long as you're happy. Dejun's nonchalant words caused Chi-Chi to hesitate a little. On one hand, the little girl cherished the things she liked. On the other hand, it seemed that what Dejun said was quite right. If the clothes were dirty, couldn't they be washed clean? At this moment, the rhythm of the music suddenly changed a little. It changed from a melodious classical dance music to a lively jazz music. In the green grass field, the joyous atmosphere of people singing and dancing became more and more intense. Aya, it's better not to be confused. Kiki thought it through and took the initiative to pull Nui's hand. She smiled and ran to the center of the field. Seeing the little girl holding the boy's hand with a thin white glove, the audience suddenly had the illusion that the princess was holding the gray boy's hand and walking to the center of the crowd to dance. Yes, everyone didn't see wrongly. The plot seemed to be reversed. Kiki was the real princess, and the mixed-blood handsome Nui had become the gray boy like Cinderella. Seeing them smiling so happily and brightly, it was as if the brilliance of the entire field had gathered on them. There was a kind of amazing beauty that made people gasp in amazement. Cinderella should be happily together with the handsome prince, And as for the gray boy, it seemed like he should also be together with the beautiful princess. After this, the audience's calls for Kiki and Nua-e to be a couple in variety shows became louder and louder. There were even people who urged Lu Yi to quickly cancel his son's marriage. Nua-e and Poplar Fruit's daughter should be a couple. Of course, regarding this unreliable argument, Poplar Fruit and Mohan rejected it. Maybe it was because she was inspired by her father and mother, but Kiki also learned from them and danced the cha-cha with Nua-e. Ah, I feel that this is too fun. In his happiness, Nua-e began to nag again. In the past, my mother and I were in France. Of course, the little boy's nag was a little different from Tripitaka's. He was a little bold and imaginative as he talked about his own experiences, or his own wild imaginations. He was not just repeating nonsense, but it made the audience unable to hold back their laughter. Aya, brother Nua-e, you're too fast again. Kiki chuckled as she complained. Her skirt had a few footprints on it. Luckily, the little girl had already let go of her obsession. It seemed like the tacit understanding between the two little fellows was not on the same level as Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei. Although they were having fun, they would occasionally step on each other's feet, trouser legs, or skirt. There was no way to ignore it. Even if their tacit understanding was high, Kiki's rhythm would be disrupted by Nua-e's strange coordination with his hands and feet. However, they did not care as they danced and twisted their bodies. Gradually, Dajuan and Xian also joined in. Then they called Kong Kong and Nina over. Zhou Shimin also pushed Hao Hao over. The atmosphere was getting better and better. The little fellows were having more fun than the adults. Chapter 1493. What do you think love is? After the grand reception ceremony and the joyous dance, the recording of the show did not end. Just like many domestic TV dramas and variety shows, Daddy doesn't want the show to end in a sea of laughter. It doesn't seem to be the style of the show if we don't end with a sensational ending. After changing their clothes, the children were first brought to the grass by the village chief and asked the philosophical question one-on-one. The children's answers to this question were different. Or rather, they all had their own understanding of love. Kong Kong even sighed and said in an adult tone, "Don't ask such a difficult question. I can't answer it, I know it in my heart." However, it seemed that every child's answer was the same. Love is being together. Love is being together with Daddy. Happiness is being together with all the children. Daddy being with me is love. Chi-Chi's answer was rather mature. That was because she had memorized the words that Fong Bei and Yanghua had said back then. Moreover, she had engraved them in her heart. The little girl sat on the green grass with her hands hugging her knees. Her long black hair spread out like a waterfall. Her beautiful face seemed to be very sincere, and her eyes were very serious as she said, "Love and like are different. Like is like, love is love." The little girl's voice was very soft and pleasant, as if a cute skylark had flown to the southern hemisphere of Oceania. Like is that you think something is good. For example, I like Barbie dolls. I like to eat Daddy's dishes. In comparison, Kiki's description was much cuter. Some viewers who didn't pay attention to the content would even laugh and say that they liked to see my daughter, who was not even half an adult, talk nonsense in a serious manner. But Kiki was actually very right. But love is different. The little girl raised her arms high as if to show that love was much higher than like. Love is a lot of likes, 100 million likes. Mama said. Because love is when you like so much, and then you want to be together forever and never separate. Kiki spoke clearly as if she was reciting a book. She didn't deliberately imitate the tone of an adult like Kong Kong, but what she said were things that adults might not necessarily understand. Although Kiki's speech was a little long, she summed it up like the rest of her friends. Love means being together. Love means never being apart. Or to put it more narrowly, the definition of love in this show was to be together with one's parents, with one's family. After asking the questions, Zhang Tai's parents also changed their clothes. They sat around the U-shaped dining table in the dining room of the cabin and had a simple lunch. However, after eating, no one left their seats. Some staff members removed the plates and moved an LCD screen in front of them. On the eve of the farewell, the real emotional moment began. The village chief was the one who was still wearing his formal suit. He hadn't changed out of it just now. He pointed at the LCD screen and said, "On this journey, we have too many touching stories. Today we chose a Xiao Duan for everyone to reminisce." Just as the subtitles of the video said, this summer for fathers and children was a sudden big adventure. It was also a growing journey of love and searching. The video started with the introduction of the 5 fathers at the beginning of the show's recording. Then it mixed and edited with bits and pieces of the first 7 journeys. Among them, there were many scenes that made everyone laugh uncontrollably. There were also many scenes that made people feel uncomfortable, embarrassed, and even regretful. Slowly, the memories of the fathers and children were evoked in the audience. At the beginning, everyone was still laughing happily, but slowly, everyone present had tears in their eyes. Even the mothers who had shallow tear ducts had to use tissues to wipe their tears. They were laughing because the memories were indeed full of laughter. They were crying because they were a little worried now. Worried that the show's recording would end. They were worried that after it ended, there would be no chance for them to reunite. Or even if there was a chance, this laughter could only be picked up occasionally. Every child and their father had a separate clip. For example, Lin Yongjian and Dejun were placed first. The production team wasn't afraid of reopening some scars of the past, but the more they looked at the past, the more they could see Dejun's growth in the past 5 months. Dejun, who was unreliable, often cheated his father, and often threw tantrums, had now grown a lot. At least now, he was only slightly unreliable, occasionally cheated his father, and no longer threw tantrums. Not long after, it was Kiki's turn. Actually, Poplar Fruit felt that his daughter hadn't changed much in the past 5 months. But she didn't. From the very beginning of the secret rooms test, Yang Guo had the urge to tear up. The change was still very big. Or rather, putting aside the psychological aspect, among the 5 children, Kiki had changed the most. Back then, she was still a skinny little girl. Now, she was already a little beauty loved by all the viewers in the country. Not only had she grown taller and prettier, Kiki's personality had also changed. Back when they first started recording the show, the little girl was very clingy, just like when she was young, just like Beckham's little 7. When they went out, she would let her father carry her, and she usually liked to stay with her father. There was even one point that left a deep impression on Poplar Fruit. At that time, Kiki still wanted to sleep with her parents every night. In the video, Poplar Fruit once said worriedly in an interview, "Kiki has been with me since she was born. Unless Bebe helps to take care of her, I will bring her with me even when I go on business trips or hold press conferences. I'm really worried that when I'm not by her side, she will cry nonstop. Thinking of this, I feel very sad." However, it could be seen that in the past 5 months, Kiki had become much more independent. Not only did she no longer need her father to carry her, but she also didn't pester her father to play with her all the time. It was as if she was slowly learning how to socialize, and she enjoyed every bit of happiness from playing with her friends. In the show, she could even accept that her father wasn't by her side temporarily. For example, during the 2nd trip to Min Province, and the 5th trip to Shijiang, Kiki had to sleep with her friends at night, or even sleep alone, but she bravely persevered. At home, Kiki could already live in her own little house, and she could sleep alone at night. Of course, she still wanted her father to tell her stories, and she could only listen to her father's voice when she fell asleep. But these were all improvements. Chapter 1494. When the scene moved forward at a brisk pace, the scenes flashed one after another. Poplar Fruit could no longer hold back the tears in his eyes. Kiki was the only protagonist left on the screen. Poplar Fruit temporarily withdrew from this small stage. First, during the 2nd journey, when they parted in front of the earthen building, Kiki finally could not help but cry. It was like lightning that pierced through everyone's heart. "Papa, I don't want you to leave." The little girl, who had been strong for so long, cried in her father's arms at this time. Poplar Fruit's reaction was the same as before. His eyes turned red all of a sudden. Kiki was strong during the mission. While muttering, "I have to perform well so that Papa can come back," she tried her best to take care of herself and her friends. Then, she completed one mission after another. The scene came to the 5th journey. Poplar Fruit was absent because of his injury. After the military training, the little girl, whose bangs were wet with sweat, sat at the dining table to eat. However, she inexplicably grabbed her food and cried. Her tears were as big as beans and fell into her food. Her friends came over to comfort her. Kiki said the reason. "I miss my papa. He's injured. I'm very worried about him." The camera panned to Poplar Fruit, who was sitting next to his daughter. Poplar Fruit could no longer hold back his emotions. While smiling, he wiped the tears from the corner of his eyes with his hand. Poplar Fruit noticed that the 4th journey in the clouds had been skipped by the program team intentionally or unintentionally. Although that was more emotional, they did not want to reveal the bad memory that no one wanted to recall. The video moved forward very quickly. Soon, it came to the 6th journey of Poplar Fruit's return. In the Hmong village in the South Lake, there was a small behind-the-scenes scene. Poplar Fruit's wound was pulled because of a fierce competition. It was not bleeding, but it was very painful. He needed to sit aside and rest while grimacing. Kiki, who was originally playing happily on the swing with her friends, saw this and walked over in confusion. After asking about it, she accompanied her father with a worried expression and was unwilling to leave. What touched Poplar Fruit and the parents the most was how Kiki used her little hands to rub her father's wounds. Before everyone's emotions could brew, the scene flashed, and they returned to their previous journey. The background was the gloomy prison. In the flickering candlelight, Kiki, who was dressed in civilian clothes, said to her father in the prison, "Papa, don't be afraid. I will definitely get you out of here." Haha, the restaurant was filled with laughter. Kiki's overly serious expression had indeed struck a chord with everyone. However, the reunion after a long separation was more touching. The video seemed to be moving backward in time. It started from the 7th journey and showed the happy smiling faces of the little girl who had completed the task and returned to find her father. Of course, what touched everyone the most was the 2nd trip. During the night in the earthen building, Chi-Chi bravely went to sleep alone, and when her father returned, she leaped out of her blanket with elation and wrapped her arms tightly around her father's neck. Seeing Kiki's strong attachment and deep joy, everyone could not help but smile, because this feeling of happiness caught everyone's heart without any hindrance. Yonggwa smiled as tears flowed down her cheeks. These weren't tears of sadness, but of happiness. This memory was actually very clear. However, after watching the video, Poplar Fruit recalled it again. At that time, the feeling of being hugged tightly by the sleeping little girl was really good. Only when losing could one understand the importance of having. This was not only for Kiki, but also for Poplar Fruit. Kiki's video ended in a warm atmosphere. This video was not the same as the other children's videos, because the other children's videos were only a review of their progress from the past to the present. Perhaps this was also the deeper meaning of the program team. Because Chi-Chi had slowly improved from a clingy father, childish and a little delicate little girl, she had grown into a true little princess who was responsible, united with her companions, and sensible. However, Kiki also had her own persistence, and that was her love for her father, which would never fade. Even if they looked from the back to the front, everyone still had to applaud Kiki. After watching the video, her father had to give a speech. Poplar Fruit was not afraid. He wiped away his tears with a smile, stood up and said generously, "Many friends on the internet say that I am very lucky." His voice was a little hoarse because he was moved. "I also think that I am very lucky, really lucky." Poplar Fruit smiled, lowered his head, and looked at Fong Beibei. He patted his daughter's little head and said, "With such an obedient and sensible daughter, you have also met the love of your life." When I saw Kiki's birth in the hospital, I felt like the sky was falling down, because I had just graduated for less than a year, and I suddenly had a daughter. Poplar Fruit said as if he was reminiscing. Taking care of a child is a very difficult thing, and taking care of a child alone is even more difficult. Poplar Fruit said, "But what everyone doesn't know is that Kiki has been very obedient and sensible since she was a child. She doesn't cry or be naughty. Compared to other parents, I am very lucky." Poplar Fruit repeated the word lucky many times. It was not a slip of the tongue, or that he was incoherent because he was moved, but it was important to say it 3 times. Then I met Beibei. Poplar Fruit lowered his head and kissed Fang Beibei's forehead. The latter hugged Kiki shyly and said, "The 2 luckiest things in my life are that I can be with Beibei. Not only has she helped and supported me a lot in life, but the most important thing is that I love her, she loves me, and she also loves Kiki," Poplar Fruit said. Suddenly, Kiki raised her head and helped her father to add, "I also love Mama. Yes, because we both love each other. So we are very happy, Poplar Fruit said. Poplar Fruit continued, "It is really a pleasure to participate in this show. Kiki and I have met so many super good friends, and we have gone on adventures together, leaving so many wonderful memories together. But I think that there is actually a very precious harvest. It is through these 8 trips that we have learned to express love." Poplar Fruit's words made everyone nod. Our Chinese families are actually more reserved. Love is in the heart, and can't be said out loud, Poplar Fruit said. But this is not a good tradition. We should express it boldly, so that there will be fewer obstacles to happiness. So I suggest that we all, the audience in front of the TV. Poplar Fruit was a little bit of a teacher's occupational disease, but he said it very well. Everyone looked at him seriously and said, "Give the people you love a hug. Children, hug your parents and tell them, 'Daddy, Mommy, I love you.' Mommy and Daddy also hug the children and tell the children, 'Baby, I love you.'" Poplar Fruit looked at Zhou Shimin and the others, who had already taken action in front of him, and said with a smile, "I believe that when you express your love, you will also receive the love of your family. I hope that all of our families can be happy and perfect." Chapter 1495. After the video ended, the fathers finished their speeches. It seemed that it was really time to say goodbye. The atmosphere was a little solemn, because no one wanted to say goodbye. Even some of the children, fathers, and mothers still had red eyes. They didn't know whether they were still immersed in the previous emotions or sad, because of the upcoming parting. "Thank you." The village chief wanted to say something, but as soon as he opened his mouth, his voice broke. It was because he had watched the video just now and recalled every detail that he had participated in. When he thought of the 5 cute faces, his eyes were filled with tears. It was inevitable that his voice would break, because he wasn't prepared. The fathers laughed kindly, but because of the village chief's unexpected mistake, the sad atmosphere finally became a little more cheerful. The village chief shook his head with a smile and started again. "I really hope that we will never say goodbye. Although our trip is coming to an end, each of our children's loveliness, kindness, innocence, stubbornness, tenacity, and courage have been deeply imprinted in each of our hearts. 8 trips, 8 different experiences. I'm very happy to see the growth of the babies and the growth of each of our fathers," the village chief continued. "But this is really our last trip in the 3rd season of Where Are We Going, Dad?" Everyone stopped smiling and looked at the village chief. Kiki was still nervously holding her father's hand. She was so sad that she was about to cry. In the end, the village head said, "But we should end this pleasant journey in a particularly happy way, okay?" They stopped here for a moment because the village chief wanted to tell everyone what to say next, but Chi-Chi squeezed her head into her father's arms. "I don't want to." The little girl sniffed in her father's arms. Her voice was muffled, and only Poplar Fruit could hear it. "I know you can't bear to part with so many good friends. You feel sad." Poplar Fruit hugged his daughter, and patted her thin back gently with his big hand. "It's okay. If you feel sad, cry it out." He didn't care whether Kiki wanted to participate in the particularly happy, ending ceremony at the end. How could he let a 4-year-old child control her emotions so well? Besides, Kiki was a very emotional child. "However, Daddy also hopes that you can understand." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "We're just saying goodbye to your friends like before and going back to our own homes. Although there won't be any more shows in the future, we can still get together and have fun. Yes, we will have frequent gatherings in the future." Zhou Shimin smiled, and the other fathers all agreed. Dejun stood on the bench, but he leaned over with his hands on the table. He didn't seem to be too sad about separation. Instead, he asked loudly, "Kiki, why are you crying?" Because she's afraid that she won't be able to play with you in the future. Poplar Fruit answered on behalf of his daughter. Aya, what's there to cry about? Dejun said optimistically. Now that transportation is so developed, we can still meet often. Perhaps this was what Lin Yongjian and the others used to comfort Dejun. Dejun continued. Kiki, don't cry. If you come to Beijing to play, won't you be able to find me, Nui and brother Kongkong? I'll also go to Yangqing to play with you. Your father's barbecue is super delicious. Yes, yes. Xian and the others nodded vigorously. It seemed that the best memory that Yangqing gave the children was Poplar Fruit's super delicious barbecue. Because it was a little out of context, this scene wasn't shown on TV. Otherwise, the audience would definitely be laughed to death by these grown-up yet childish children. However, Dejun's comforting words seemed to be more effective than Poplar Fruit's promise. Kiki turned around and smiled through her tears. After wiping away the tears on the little cat's face, everyone got into their positions and prepared to record the last scene. The village chief waved his hand and said, "Friends, let us continue to be happy." The camera turned to the 5 families, and everyone's face was full of smiles. Some raised their arms and cheered, while others waved their small hands and said in unison, "Happy every journey." Amidst a round of applause, the recording of "Where Are We Going, Daddy?" finally ended. Everyone left their seats and hugged, and said goodbye to their friends who had gone through 8 journeys with them. Kiki even went to the village chief, the assistant director's sister, and the cameraman uncle to hug and say goodbye to them. Village chief, will we be able to meet again in the future? Chi-Chi also seemed to understand that unlike the other children, the production team's village chief, the cameraman, and the others would have very few chances to meet in the future. It was just like how they had filmed a show with the other children in the past. In the next season, there would be new children starting a new journey. Yes, yes. Good girl. The village chief comforted Kiki. He really liked this smart and sensible girl. He smiled and said, "Didn't you already remember the village chief's phone number? If you miss the village chief in the future, just give him a call." "I will call the village chief." Kiki nodded obediently. Even if she didn't want to leave, there was no other way. In the end, they still had to leave. Other than Poplar Fruit's family who continued to stay in Australia to enjoy their holiday, the others, including Zhou Shimin and the rest, had to return to China. After all, the big stars were very busy with their work. They had a lot of movie and TV series commitments. Zhou Shimin was also busy with some of his transition work. Only Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei, one had applied for leave, while the other was still a student, so they had more time. Therefore that night Poplar Fruit and the rest sent off the rest of the team, while they planned to play in Western Australia for 2 more days. Originally, they wanted to go to Sydney, Canberra and other big cities in the east to take a look, but time didn't allow it. They had no choice, because Poplar Fruit told Fong Beibei that he suddenly had to return to China for a meeting on Friday. If they went to the east, the rest of the time could only be wasted on the road. Fong Beibei was very considerate. Not only was she not angry about Poplar Fruit's sudden change of plans, she was worried that it would delay his business, so she asked Poplar Fruit if he wanted to go home early. But how could Poplar Fruit let her suffer? Since he couldn't have a good time, he might as well seize every minute and second to enjoy his 2-day vacation. However, plans could never keep up with changes. On the afternoon of the first day, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei stayed in the hospital, experiencing the difficulties of seeing a doctor, and the long queues in Western countries. The problem wasn't Kiki, but Fong Beibei. Originally, Fong Beibei had already recovered, and no problems were found during the recording. However, who would have thought that when the family of 3 had a picnic in Perth's most famous Wildflower King Park, Fong Beibei would vomit again because of nausea. This made Poplar Fruit nervous. Although it didn't seem serious, it was the second time Fong Beibei had such a situation since they arrived in Australia. And this time, they didn't eat any seafood like lobsters. Poplar Fruit, who was worried about his wife's health, didn't care that they were unfamiliar with the place, and insisted on bringing Fong Beibei to Perth's Freeman Hospital for a checkup, hoping that there wouldn't be any major problems. Chapter 1496. It was October in Yangcheng, and the temperature was still as warm as summer. The girls on the streets were dressed fashionably, and they wore shorts, miniskirts, and high heels. Their long, white legs were the ninth most beautiful sight in Yangcheng. However, such a beautiful scenery was not located in the university town, or the old campus of other universities as people imagined. After all, there were many young and beautiful female university students there. Of course, there were also many of the former, but unfortunately, the female students were still a little shy. Relatively speaking, the place with the densest and most spectacular scenery was the central business district of Yangcheng. It was also the place that everyone used to call Zhujiang New City. There were countless skyscrapers there, and countless first-class Chinese and even international companies and enterprises were stationed there. There were also countless well-paid female white-collar workers who knew how to live a good life. Naturally, they were the main force that led the fashion trend in Yangcheng. However, Poplar Fruit did not have time to care about these beautiful scenery. He hurried out of the parking lot, passed through a small square, and walked into a 40-story building nearby. New Translation Road Publishing House moved out of a slightly remote and old building, which was later sold to Fong Beibei as a stray cat and dog rescue center and pet hospital, and moved into this building. Zheng Yujie had a good eye from the beginning. Taking advantage of the aftermath of the financial crisis, the Chinese housing market had not recovered, and the seller was eager to sell. She bought the 19th to 23rd floors of this building for 90 million. Of course, Zheng Mingsheng was also involved. At such a low price, there were many rich people who were covetously eyeing it. After buying it, the 4-story building rose from 90 million 2 years ago to a scale that could not be bought with 400 million. Not to mention buying it, just renting one floor would cost more than 500,000 a month. When they bought it, the company saved nearly 30 million a year in rent. Putting aside the investment of these fixed assets, after all, there were some political elements involved. Without Zheng Mingsheng, Zheng Yujie might not have been able to make such a big decision. When New Translation Road Publishing House bought it, they eliminated the book printing plant. It was a bit like Apple. Now they were looking for contract factories all over the world to save a lot of transportation costs. Therefore, those who remained on the 4th floor of the building were the elites of the publishing house. For example, the New Translation Road Publishing House not only nurtured its own editorial team, but also dug out a large number of top editors at home and abroad. They did not have a fixed grouping but would work in the form of a project. Every time there would be a different editorial team to review and communicate with the authors and translators. The strongest was the business team led by Zheng Yujie. Half of the team was Chinese, while the other half was hired from overseas. After 1 to 3 years of working together, they had formed a powerful fighting force that even international publishing giants could not ignore. The most important thing was that they had adapted to the more popular online marketing model. They had used a variety of channels to promote the translations of many online literary works in the country, so that their names could be seen on the bestseller list for the next few years. Just like Harry Potter, Twilight, and so on back then, in the current international literary boom, not only Western fantasy, but Chinese fantasy had also gained a firm foothold. Not to mention other things, because of the eagerness of people around the world. Several novels had been bought by Hollywood movie giants in the second half of this year. Although New Translation Road could not profit from it, they saw the new Chinese culture gradually rising on the world stage under their promotion. This feeling of glory filled everyone in New Translation Road with passion for their work. This was the difference that Poplar Fruit felt when he returned to the publishing house this time. Last time, it seemed that because of the aftermath of the company's equity turmoil, everyone except the senior management was a little nervous. Now everyone's face was full of smiles, and many people took the initiative to greet Poplar Fruit. It was as if this huge cultural aircraft carrier was on the right path. And that was the truth. Yanghua didn't think too much about it. The development of the publishing house wasn't something he needed to worry about. He didn't have the ability to do so. The main reason he came back this time was because of the national policy support that Zheng Yujie mentioned. He was very useful. Putting aside the previous achievements of the publishing house, Poplar Fruit's name was also well known in the industry. Except for his lack of qualifications and young age, Poplar Fruit's ability could definitely be called the leader of the translation world. His translation of many works had already set a Guinness World Record in sales, and the wealth that he earned and created by himself was naturally unmatched in the translation world. In history, no one could find a translator who could earn more money than him. Of course, Poplar Fruit's main job was a teacher, but his contribution to New Translation Road, and even the entire Chinese translation world, should not be underestimated. In addition to his translation ability, Poplar Fruit also trained more than a dozen gold medal translators, and a large number of silver medal translators with high potential for New Translation Road. And his voice in the reform of the entire translation industry, through New Translation Road, was no less than Martin Luther King's contribution to the Black community, because the reform of income sharing led by New Translation Road was gradually showing results. It couldn't be helped. If the other publishing houses did not do what New Translation Road did, their translators would probably have to go to New Translation Road. It was precisely because of this reason that the literary translation market changed from its previous decline and showed signs of prosperity. Moreover, the market's demand for language talents and high-level translators had increased, which also promoted the development of language education. This was only the tip of the iceberg that everyone could see but had not fully revealed yet. It was believed that in the future, the treatment of language talents would get better and better, and the spread of Chinese culture and the integration of the world's culture would also show a more positive attitude. At the end of the day, it was Poplar Fruit's contribution that pushed this domino effect. For example, the reason for this meeting, the country's decision to support the cultural export industry, wasn't at all because of Poplar Fruit's thesis published in the middle of this year. The entire cultural market, and even the movie and TV drama markets, had been shaken by Poplar Fruit's thesis. How could the country ignore it? In the past, they could only help the spread of Chinese culture through small policy support such as the Confucius Institute. Now that they had the opportunity to change from passive to active, the country naturally had to support the development of the cultural industry. On one hand, they had to go out. On the other hand, they had to add new vitality and blood to the cultural industry, through going out to prevent the cultural industry from suffering a greater impact after the end of the WDO protection period at the end of this year. It was time to change from defense to offense. Blindly defending would only result in being beaten up. Poplar Fruit listened to the explanation of the country's department representatives at the meeting and understood the key to it. He admired it from the bottom of his heart, and his fighting spirit surged. However, the problem was not this. The problem was, why did he feel that Zheng Yujie was a little absent-minded in this important meeting? Why did this sister of his seem to be secretly winking at him? Chapter 1497. Such an important matter naturally could not be settled in one meeting. After listening to the spiritual transmission from above, the New Translation Road would have several meetings in the next few days. Then the senior management would discuss how to use the support of this policy to develop the New Translation Road better. For them, reaching the standard was no longer a problem. Poplar Fruit still had to come to the meeting later. He was going to chat with Zheng Yujie as usual, then say goodbye and go home. However, after entering Zheng Yujie's office, Zheng Yujie suddenly pounced on him. She was so fast that Poplar Fruit could only hurriedly throw away the folder and other things in his hand before he could hold Zheng Yujie's shoulder. However, the emotions that had long been difficult to suppress had already made Zheng Yujie lose control. Before Poplar Fruit could hold her, she pushed Poplar Fruit down on the sofa, then pressed down on Poplar Fruit's head and kissed him hard. At that time, the soft touch of nearly 4 years was like a small hand imprinted on Poplar Fruit's lips. His pupils shrank instantly, and his mind went blank for nearly 2 seconds. Then he hurriedly helped Zheng Yujie up. Zheng Yujie would not know that at that moment, Poplar Fruit's body seemed to have traveled to his girlfriend's wedding. However, the surroundings were silent, and the messy tables and chairs were empty. Only he and Zheng Yujie were left. Then at that time he was also kissed by force. Zheng Yujie's kiss was a bit like a rose. It was fiery red, passionate, and full of a suffocating fragrance. Poplar Fruit almost lost himself in it. But roses had thorns. After being absent-minded for 2 seconds, Poplar Fruit reacted and hurriedly helped Zheng Yujie up. Yujie. Poplar Fruit stood up angrily and looked at Zheng Yujie, who was still stretching her body on the sofa, and said, "You, what are you doing? Your words, your head is rejecting." Zheng Yujie did not seem to hear Poplar Fruit's words. She smiled softly and said happily, "But your mouth, your heart, and your body are reacting strongly." Zheng Yujie raised her hand and pointed to Poplar Fruit's crotch. Her fingers were painted with red nail polish and her skin was very white. She had always done a good job of taking care of her body. Poplar Fruit turned his body in embarrassment. He frowned and said, "Are you testing me?" Although he was a little distracted by Zheng Yujie's surprise, Poplar Fruit quickly at this time, and his voice sounded a little different. "Why would I test you?" Zheng Yujie heard Poplar Fruit's dissatisfaction. She was a little flustered. She waved her hand and said with some grievance, "You've been avoiding me. I just want to kiss you. Do you hate me?" Zheng Yujie had been in Guangdong province for a few years, so she spoke with a Cantonese accent. Poplar Fruit said helplessly, "I don't hate you, but we shouldn't be like this." Towards Zheng Yujie, the guilt in his heart made him unable to say anything harsh. Naturally, he could not bear to scold her. "Then why are you still avoiding me? Why do you always refuse to see me?" Zheng Yujie seemed to not understand Poplar Fruit's words. At this moment, she was like a hurt schoolgirl, and Poplar Fruit was the bad boyfriend. Poplar Fruit was a little crazy. He really wanted to scold her, but he couldn't open his mouth. Scratching his head, Poplar Fruit said with a bitter face, "Yujie, stop it, okay? You know, it's impossible between us. I've already registered with Bei. Poplar Fruit could only repeat the same old story and clarify the relationship with Zheng Yujie. "I know." Zheng Yujie nodded and said. She walked over and stared straight at Yang Guo. That pair of phoenix eyes and eyebrows were really beautiful. They were affectionate, and had a charm that could captivate one's soul. Poplar Fruit had to continue saying, "It's great that you know. I have a good relationship with Fang Bei, and I won't leave her." I know. Zheng Yujie grabbed Poplar Fruit's hand and didn't let him pull it out. They stood face to face across the table, and Zheng Yujie's eyes were filled with tears. The moment his hand was grabbed, Poplar Fruit felt like he had been electrocuted. But when he saw Zheng Yujie's tears, which was the opposite of what she had just said, his heart was fiercely grasped, and he didn't pull his hand out. "I know. I didn't understand before, but now I know." Zheng Yujie's words made Poplar Fruit feel a little confused. "I won't ask you to leave her, and I won't break up your family. I'm not that kind of bad person." Zheng Yujie's eyes were filled with tears, and she said with infinite grievance, "But I know you have me in your heart. You have me in your heart, and that's enough." "What do you mean?" Poplar Fruit felt a little confused. "That is." Zheng Yujie was a little shy, but she wasn't a shy person. Instead, she opened her eyes wide, looked at Poplar Fruit boldly and said, "I'm willing to only be your lover, and I don't want any title." Ah. Poplar Fruit felt like his head had been hit by a bullet, no a bomb. He doubted his ears. Did he hear it wrong? How could Zheng Yujie say something like that? Zheng Yujie's face was a little pink. She gritted her teeth and said shyly and angrily, "I'll say it. I want to be your lover." She bit out the rest of the sentence word by word. After saying that, Zheng Yujie seemed to have lost all her strength. She nervously grabbed Poplar Fruit's hand and looked into his eyes nervously. Poplar Fruit's mind was in a mess at the moment. It was even more chaotic than when Kiki was kidnapped. His brain couldn't handle two things at the same time. What did she mean by being his lover? What was a lover? Zheng Yujie looked at Poplar Fruit with his mouth wide open. After a while, she couldn't wait any longer. She pushed Poplar Fruit angrily, and her shyness disappeared. Instead, she said angrily, "Hey, give me some reaction." Even if she was his lover, it wasn't like Weibo where he only followed her for a while. At the very least, there should be a verification like WeChat. Poplar Fruit finally came to his senses. He said with a wry smile, "Yujie, don't joke around. What kind of personality did Zheng Yujie have? What kind of family background did she have? How could Poplar Fruit not know? How could she be his lover?" But Zheng Yujie was just like that. She pursed her lips and looked straight at him. Even the tears in her eyes couldn't hide her stubbornness. "You're not joking?" Poplar Fruit panicked. He looked at Zheng Yujia's eyes and panicked. He didn't deceive himself anymore. "You're the one who's joking." Zheng Yujia went around the table and pounced on him. She blinked her eyes and tears fell down. Poplar Fruit hurriedly grabbed Zheng Yujia's hand, but he couldn't stop her from falling into his arms. When that warm and soft body was tightly pressed against him, Poplar Fruit suddenly calmed down. "Yujia, listen to me. I really didn't want to torture Sister Zheng. You have to believe that Xiaohan is a good person." Chapter 1498. That's right, Fong Beibei was pregnant. Back in Perth, Poplar Fruit had brought Fong Beibei for a checkup, and they had queued up for a very long time. In the end, when they arrived, the doctor told them that they had registered for the wrong number. They should have applied for the gynecology department. Poplar Fruit had been a little confused at the time. Fong Beibei didn't understand English and Poplar Fruit had no concept of medicine at all. He thought that the gynecology department could cure nausea, so he could only follow the doctor's instructions and queue up again. After waiting for another hour, Poplar Fruit listened to the gynecologist's explanation and was dumbfounded. He wondered if he had heard wrongly. He even confirmed it with the doctor several times. Then Poplar Fruit excitedly told Fong Beibei that she was pregnant. No wonder she had vomited. It wasn't the nausea from eating seafood, it was the reaction of pregnancy. "Poplar Fruit, you idiot, you big idiot. You've forgotten the plot that has been played out countless times in novels and TV shows." Of course, Poplar Fruit was also confused because he was too concerned. The sudden birth of the little life brought endless joy to Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Kiki was also overjoyed. She was finally going to be a big sister. After the ecstasy, Poplar Fruit and the others looked at each other. "That's not right. They always wear condoms when they do it. How did she get pregnant? Could it be one of those days?" Poplar Fruit whispered into Fong Beibei's ear. After some investigation, it was indeed true. Fong Beibei hadn't been pregnant for too long. It was about 1 or 2 months, which happened to be when Poplar Fruit returned to Yangcheng to recuperate. Although it was said to be recuperation, Poplar Fruit's injuries weren't serious. The injuries to his internal organs had been mostly healed while he was unconscious. After that, he spent a period of time recuperating in the capital, and used his internal energy to speed up the healing process. All that was left were a few flesh wounds caused by the gunshot. After all, some of his muscles were torn, burned, and even penetrated. Even with his internal strength, he could only recover a little every day. Even so, his recovery speed was already amazing to the old doctors in the capital. Although Poplar Fruit's external injuries had not completely healed, his body was still in top condition. Moreover, because there were so many people coming to visit them all day long, they received a lot of tonics at home. Fong Beibei, who had learned a lot of secret recipes for making soup from her mother, made ginseng and Ganoderma chicken soup for Poplar Fruit every day. It was so nourishing that Poplar Fruit could not vent his anger. Since his wound had not healed, he could not practice martial arts. Coincidentally, Fong Beibei also stayed at home to accompany Poplar Fruit every day. After Kiki went to kindergarten in the morning, the young couple would have sex at home, and they were very happy. At first, Fong Beibei was worried about Poplar Fruit's body. However, after 100 rounds of sex, she was so weak that she had no strength at all. While Poplar Fruit was still full of energy, she was so shy that she was pulled onto the bed by Poplar Fruit again and again. However, because Poplar Fruit was injured, Fong Beibei was the only one who could take the initiative. Poplar Fruit took advantage of the time when she was sweating profusely to persuade her not to use a condom, saying that it felt a little weak. Fong Beibei muddle-headedly agreed. Later, they both thought that it was a safe period and did not take it to heart. In the end, it seemed that it was indeed a misfire during that period of time. "It's all your fault." Fong Beibei pinched Poplar Fruit's waist and said angrily when Kiki wasn't paying attention. "It's all my fault, it's all my fault." Poplar Fruit couldn't stop smiling. He hugged Fong Beibei's head and kissed it again and again. Although it was strange, Fong Beibei and Poplar Fruit were the same. Their hearts were filled with happiness and sweetness. Of course, Fong Beibei was a little nervous. After all, she wasn't completely ready to be a mother. Therefore, on the plane home, Fang Beibei blamed Poplar Fruit many times. She blamed him for being too bad and letting her accept such news without being prepared. She blamed him for encouraging her back then, causing her to probably have to attend her wedding pregnant like sister-in-law. She also blamed Poplar Fruit for being too barbaric at night. Would his movements be too big and hurt the child? In short, Fang Beibei returned home with a worried mood. Under Poplar Fruit's careful care and Kiki's obedient performance, she gradually accepted this fact. However, this fact had a different feeling for Zheng Yujie. At this juncture, Fang Beibei, with the power of pregnancy, was like Mount Qinling between her and Poplar Fruit. She really didn't know how she should express her feelings about this matter. Hate? Actually, she didn't. After a period of self-relaxation and thinking, since she had already made up her mind to be Poplar Fruit's lover, it meant that she had already let go of the prejudice between her and Fang Beibei because of Poplar Fruit. Because she longed for Poplar Fruit's love, she was willing to no longer care about that piece of paper, and no longer care about the status that was taken by the official choice. She only pitifully pursued the person she loved and pursued the position in her lover's heart, even if it was less than half of her. Zheng Yujie's love had already reached a dead end, but she still wanted to love deeply and vigorously, even if it was just to be a lover that wasn't recognized by the world, or a mistress. Because she only had Poplar Fruit in her eyes, even the world was just a meaningless shadow, so she didn't hate Fang Beibei. Without disputes, how could there be love and hatred? However, Fang Beibei's appearance had crushed the strong will that she had built up with great effort. She knew that she could do anything for love. But how could she let Poplar Fruit do anything for her? Poplar Fruit still had Kiki, who was precious to him. Even if he had to give up his life, Poplar Fruit still had his home. In his words, it was a happy and warm home that he didn't want to destroy. Poplar Fruit still had her. The one who walked into his life when he needed her the most, the one who quietly stood behind him, the one who didn't care about glorious achievements. And now, Poplar Fruit had a new him or her. Although it was still in the womb, he would also invest a lot of love and care in that little life. Zheng Yujie couldn't see and couldn't imagine how much love she could get from such a Poplar Fruit. Of course, even if Fang Beibei wasn't pregnant, perhaps the answer she got today was no. Zheng Yujie looked dazed, but at this moment, she was unbelievably calm. Poplar Fruit looked at her worriedly and called out, Yujie, what's wrong? Zheng Yujie finally came back to her senses. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes in a panic, but when she raised her head, she put on a very calm and normal smile, and even a little teasing. "Io, why can't you take a joke?" Zheng Yujie seemed to have returned to her carefree state. She patted Poplar Fruit's shoulder and laughed. "I was just joking with you, and you took it seriously?" "Joking?" Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Yujie in surprise, but Zheng Yujie's expression at this moment told him that she was telling the truth, which made him a little confused. Chapter 1499. How could she be joking? No matter how low Poplar Fruit's EQ was, he wasn't that stupid. Zheng Yujie had already acted so infatuated earlier. So how could Poplar Fruit believe that Zheng Yujie was joking? "Yeah, I was joking. I was just teasing you. I just wanted to see if you really had feelings for me. And then you said yes." When Zheng Yujie laughed, her expression was a little gloomy for a moment. But she quickly recovered and laughed heartily. "All right, I won't tease you anymore. You don't really believe that I want to be your lover, do you?" I don't look down on myself that much." Although Zheng Yujie's every word was very confusing to Poplar Fruit wouldn't doubt his feelings just now. Zheng Yujie was hiding her feelings of disappointment. So he looked at Zheng Yujie worriedly, not knowing what to say. Should he say, "I know you're not lying to her"? Zheng Yujie was obviously giving them a way out. She was too smart and too considerate of Poplar Fruit, so she forcefully suppressed her emotions. But if Poplar Fruit still wanted to go against this and insist on sorting out the matter with Zheng Yujie, it wouldn't be good for him and Zheng Yujie. Furthermore, because he still couldn't accept Zheng Yujie, it would only lead to one result. Zheng Yujie would be hurt even more. All right, don't look at me like that." Zheng Yujie acted as if she was talking to a normal friend. She smiled naturally and said, "Your wife is pregnant. Quickly go home and take care of her. Why are you still staying here?" Zheng Yujie turned around with her back facing Poplar Fruit and said in a clear voice, "Oh yeah, you still have to come for the meeting tomorrow. It's not time for you to take maternity leave yet." The strange feeling in Poplar Fruit's heart became even stronger. But as he looked at Zheng Yujie's skinny back, his heart began to ache. But he couldn't say it out loud. Logic told him that going home was the best choice, as Zheng Yujie had said. He opened his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "I'll go back first. You have to take care of yourself. Don't think too much." Zheng Yujie didn't respond. She just waved her hand behind her, indicating for Poplar Fruit to leave quickly. Poplar Fruit gritted his teeth. Reason prevailed. He took his things and left without any hesitation. The door closed. After a long time, Zheng Yujie's shoulders began to tremble. If there was a camera that could rotate to the front of Zheng Yujie, it would definitely be able to see that her slightly lowered head was full of tears. Sob sob. Zheng Yujie's cries were suppressed in her throat, but the falling tears quickly wet the documents in her hands. This was no longer something she could control. In the huge office, only Zheng Yujie's figure was left, and only her choked sobs could be heard in the end. She cried so much that she couldn't maintain her standing posture. She quietly hid behind the office desk, hugged her legs, and cried in a corner. The grievance in her heart seemed to have overturned the Pacific Ocean. Tears flowed endlessly from her eyes and rolled down. Why? However, no one knew about her grievance and her repeated questioning. She didn't want anyone to know about her weakness. Poplar Fruit didn't know either. Or rather, he could vaguely feel it, but he didn't dare to think or guess. He already owed enough. When Poplar Fruit returned home, Kiki and Fong Beibei hadn't returned yet. Fong Beibei had to go to school in the afternoon, so she insisted on going to pick up Kiki. Poplar Fruit didn't stop her at that time. Fong Beibei was only 2 months pregnant, and her belly didn't show any signs of pregnancy yet. Naturally, there was no need to worry too early. However, even though Fong Beibei and Kiki hadn't returned home yet, Poplar Fruit still felt a little guilty, so he went to take a shower and changed his clothes. Previously, when he had intimate contact with Zheng Yujie, there was some scent on him. Although Fong Beibei wouldn't check, Poplar Fruit was still worried. In fact, Poplar Fruit was overthinking. Fong Beibei didn't care much about these details, and she didn't even ask why Poplar Fruit took a shower. When she returned, she was just like Kiki, smiling happily from beginning to end. When I went to school, the teachers and classmates heard about it, and they all looked at me like I was some kind of big shot. Fong Beibei smiled like my daughter, and pulled Poplar Fruit to talk about the interesting things that happened that day. One by one, they came to look at me, and then a classmate said that pregnant women shouldn't sit in front of the computer, because they would be radiated by the computer. She even said it vividly, and copied the attitude that the classmate was eager to show off. He was right. Poplar Fruit laughed. So, our teacher moved me to the back of the classroom. Fong Beibei giggled. He even gave me a big stack of paper and said, "Fong Beibei, you can sit here at ease. Don't use the computer. You can practice your calculation skills." Poplar Fruit couldn't help but laugh. Kiki poked her head over and asked, "Then Mama can't watch TV in the future, right?" "Yes. Not only can't you watch TV, you can't use your phone or iPad." Poplar Fruit pulled his daughter into his arms and laughed. "Then you might as well kill me." Fong Beibei rolled her eyes and laughed. Of course, this was a joke between Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei. Didn't he see that Fong Beibei was making a face at Poplar Fruit? That's quite tragic. Chi-Chi, on the other hand, believed her. She looked at Fong Beibei with sorrow in her heart. She felt that it was scary to not have a television or anything like that. Could she not watch cartoons in the future? Don't listen to your father's nonsense. Actually, the radiation isn't that serious. Also, it'll be fine if you wear an anti-radiation suit. Fong Beibei laughed. Oh right, I need to call Shanshan and ask her to go shopping with me tomorrow to buy some clothes. As she spoke, she took her phone and walked to the side to make a call. She didn't think of asking Poplar Fruit to go shopping with her, because Poplar Fruit was very busy. Also, it was boring to go shopping with Poplar Fruit. He couldn't give any advice about girls. As for the problem of money, that was even less of a problem. She had an unlimited overdraft of Poplar Fruit's card with her. Kiki stayed behind and chatted with her father about what had happened today. Grandpa and Grandma said that they're coming to visit me the day after tomorrow. They'll buy a lot of delicious food for me, and there'll be new Barbie dolls too, the little girl said happily. In her heart, she was already daydreaming about the happy days after her grandparents' arrival. Poplar Fruit smiled and rubbed the little girl's head. He understood the reason. His parents-in-law were mainly here to visit their newly pregnant daughter. Kiki was also one of their main targets. The elders wanted to serve Kiki well. They were worried that Kiki would be unhappy after the birth of a new brother or sister. In any case, they wanted Kiki to feel her importance so that her brother or sister wouldn't be bullied by her. Poplar Fruit knew that his daughter was kind-hearted, but he didn't intend to say it out loud. In any case, it was a good thing for the elders to care for their daughter more. I repeat, I'm really not torturing Sister Zheng. Xiao Han guarantees with his character. It seems that he doesn't have much character left. Chapter 1500. After returning home, because Feng Beibei did not notice his strange behavior at all, Poplar Fruit was finally relieved. He was also somewhat emotional. After all, he was not the kind of playboy who could cheat without batting an eyelid. This also strengthened his determination to be a good husband and a good father. To Poplar Fruit's relief, when he went to the company for a meeting the next day, Zheng Yujie did not mention the awkwardness and emotional entanglement that had happened the day before. On the contrary, Zheng Yujie behaved very normally. She talked to him as usual. When it was necessary to hit him, she hit him. When it was necessary to make a fuss, she made a fuss. She had a kind of carefree and unrestrained manner, as if nothing had happened the day before. Poplar Fruit was more or less worried, but he did not pretend to be a good person anymore. The more entanglement there was, the greater the damage it would cause. In the end, Poplar Fruit looked at Zheng Yujie with some complicated feelings. He went home after the meeting. However, his sixth sense told him that when he walked out of the building, there was a pair of eyes watching him from upstairs, unwilling to leave for a long time. However, Poplar Fruit had no choice. He sighed softly and turned to leave. The house felt like it was in turmoil and chaos. It was mainly because after hearing the news that Feng Beibei was pregnant, Mother Feng rushed over. Then, Poplar Fruit's godmother and Song Jiwen's mother also received a request from Poplar Fruit's mother, Su Jinfeng, to come over and join in the fun. When the two elders gathered together, naturally, they would not be nice to Poplar Fruit, who asked this guy to be an expert in misfires. Previously, he had inexplicably brought back a daughter, and now Feng Beibei was pregnant before marriage. Although the young couple had already registered their marriage, in the eyes of the elders, if they did not hold a wedding banquet, they were not considered married at all. During the day, the two elders took Feng Beibei for a checkup, and at night, they urged Poplar Fruit to hurry up and hold the wedding with Feng Beibei. Otherwise, when the pregnancy was obvious, wouldn't they be laughed at by their relatives? However, at that time, Yang Gua and Feng Beibei were planning to get married after the Spring Festival next year. At that time, they even informed their classmates and asked them to apply for leave in advance, so that they could all come over for a gathering. If they suddenly brought forward the wedding, it would disrupt all the plans. However, Poplar Fruit and Feng Beibei's protest was immediately cruelly suppressed by the three parties. Even Su Jinfeng called from her hometown to give Poplar Fruit a scolding. How could a marriage be delayed because of a few guests' schedule problems? They had no choice but to start a new plan now. Seeing that the elders were staying up late talking on the phone and looking at the almanac to see the time, Feng Beibei also called her best friends the next day, and Chen Anlin, who was holding Song Debao, who was not even a year old yet, and hurriedly discussed the wedding plan at the end of November. Poplar Fruit listened to them, and he slipped out with the excuse of continuing the meeting, leaving the mess to this group of excited women. When he came back in the evening, he saw that they were still discussing in high spirits. Even Kiki could not help but join in the fun. So after dinner, Poplar Fruit, Song Jiwen, and Wang Yuba, the three men, drove out to play. They went for a ride, sang karaoke, and went to a barbecue restaurant for supper. It felt like a bachelor's night in Western countries, where the men went crazy before getting married. Of course, when they came back, they were inevitably caught by the women and scolded. "We were so busy, but you went to have fun in the dark." The men, who were beaten up, finally behaved and obediently planned the wedding with the women. Song Ji-wen was responsible for the hotel reservations and some procurement work. Who asked Section Chief Song to know so many people? Wang Yuba was also a smart person. He was responsible for accompanying the beauties to shop and bargain, and was responsible for dressing up the bridesmaids beautifully. Of course, he also had to contribute to his best man group. As for Poplar Fruit, he had to call them one by one according to the list provided by the women, explain the reason for the change of date, and invite the guests to attend their wedding. However, within 2 days, the news of Fong Beibei's pregnancy had spread all over the world. After all, at this time, Poplar Fruit and Kiki received unprecedented attention because of the hit, "Where Are We Going, Dad?" which was still on TV. Although the family kept a low profile and didn't accept any interviews, there were still paparazzi circling around them. The news leaked mainly because after returning to Yangcheng, the two elders hurriedly took Fong Beibei to the hospital for a checkup. They were caught off guard, so the ambushing reporters got the first-hand news. The reporters also knew that Poplar Fruit was going to hold their wedding in advance. Suddenly, there were all kinds of rumors of a shotgun wedding. Of course, this wasn't bad news. After all, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were already a model couple in the hearts of the audience. The two of them even got a marriage certificate before, so they just lacked a grand wedding. Naturally, the rumors of a shotgun wedding weren't derogatory. On the contrary, after the news spread, Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei received the blessings of a large number of fans. Many fans even went to Poplar Fruit's Weibo to ask him to take care of their top student goddess. Of course, Kiki's fans also said, "Continue to treat our Kiki well." They were still a little worried that Kiki would be ostracized. Naturally, they didn't have to worry about this. Fong Beibei had always been very good to Kiki, especially after they saw Fong Beibei's performance on the show. Fong Beibei's pregnancy received a lot of attention. Although Poplar Fruit and the rest didn't accept any interviews, they only released a piece of news through Mango Station. Fong Beibei's pregnancy was an unexpected surprise when she went to the hospital for a checkup after recording the show in Western Australia, because she wasn't feeling well. Therefore, the last 2 episodes of the show were hyped up even before they were aired, and other stills were released. As a result, in the last episode, when Fong Beibei and the others appeared, the show's viewership ratings broke the record. Putting this hype aside, not long after Poplar Fruit finished recording the show, a bunch of production companies and directors came looking for him. They wanted him and Kiki to shoot movies, TV dramas, and advertisements. Naturally, Poplar Fruit wouldn't accept it. He wasn't short of money, and he wouldn't use Kiki as his money tree. As for whether his daughter wanted to enter the entertainment industry, he wouldn't make a decision for Kiki. Everything would have to wait until she grew up, or until Kiki could judge right from wrong and make her own decisions. However, there was an invitation that made Poplar Fruit a little tempted. It was from a Beijing satellite TV program group that came over after hearing that Fong Beibei was pregnant. They planned a variety show called The Age of the Second Child. The concept of the creation was naturally the more popular issue of the second child policy. They wanted to invite Poplar Fruit's family as guests to participate in the recording of several episodes, especially to show Kiki's care for her younger siblings. However, Poplar Fruit still refused. He was also very busy with his own work at school and publishing house. Fong Beibei was pregnant and needed him to take care of her. He really didn't have time to fly around. There was no other reason. Xiaohan didn't want to be called underwater by everyone anymore. Chapter 1501. Time passed quite quickly, like quicksand between one's fingers. 2 months passed in the blink of an eye. In these 2 months, Poplar Fruit was naturally not busy with his and Fong Beibei's wedding. The wedding matters had long been enthusiastically taken over by a group of buddies and Fong Beibei's best friends. After he finished the phone call, he turned his head and immersed himself in his work. In school, Poplar Fruit taught diligently for a month, Previously, he had applied for leave and changed classes a lot. Due to his popularity, Poplar Fruit's classes were always full. Of course, many people did not understand the small languages taught by Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit, who had made time, also attended a few meetings in the school. The main content of the meetings naturally could not be separated from the Eurasian department that they had just started less than half a year ago. Although the Eurasian department had been brewing among the school's higher-ups for a few years before this year, after its first academic year, there were still many problems, big and small, that were not small. Small problems were still manageable. With Yang Guo, who could deal with almost all languages, as well as many outstanding talents hired from outside, those small problems in teaching could be easily solved. The big problems were a bit troublesome. The most direct problem was also one that they had considered when they were planning before. The popularity of the languages is very divided. There were big languages and small languages in foreign languages. Naturally, there were niche languages and even more niche languages that no one cared about. For example, there were many students who chose Hindi as their third language because Hindi was actually a very important market. For example, it had become the second largest overseas market for domestic mobile phone manufacturers after Africa. Now and in the future, the demand for Hindi language talents would definitely continue to rise. But relatively speaking, ancient Sanskrit, which was more inclined towards academic and not application, was ignored. To be honest, the status of Sanskrit was definitely not low. For example, Latin, Greek, and the Chinese that we use are all among the oldest languages, and the number of documents in Sanskrit is second only to Chinese. However, it had indeed retired from the stage of history. Now it only existed in academic and religious terms. Since 99.9% of them would not be able to use it after graduation, nor could they be converted into economic value. Then what was the point of learning it? The students were very realistic, but no one could deny that their choice was wrong, because that was the truth. The market determined the demand, and economic benefits determined the academic path. Moreover, everyone had their own aspirations. You could not drag others onto your chariot just because you advocated the academic spirit. In the past, the school's idea was to give it a try and keep it open. After all, there was Poplar Fruit, who was a jack of all trades. They could use it as a pilot. If it worked in the future, they would continue to recruit teachers. If it didn't work, they would just remove it. Therefore, even though many people came to Poplar Fruit's Sanskrit class, most of them came to see him or listen to his stories in simple terms. Only 5 people really chose his class, and among them, 2 of them were replaced. It seemed that they might not be able to last until the next semester. After all, the onlookers could laugh happily, but the real class had to take an exam. Therefore, the school planned to remove the majors that did not have many people choosing, such as Sanskrit, Danish, Azerbaijani, and so on. The majors that were chosen by less than 10 people were suggested to be removed from the school's catalog of majors. Naturally, the ones that were left behind were the minor languages that had a wide audience. Not to mention the teachers, the school had to spend a lot of money to maintain the survival of these unpopular majors, and it would also arouse the disgust of some students who were replaced. Therefore, instead of barely maintaining it, it was better to invest the resources in this area into languages that had a wider audience, recruit more teachers, and let more students choose a third language that they liked. However, there was also a problem with this. The school could not always be led by the market. If they looked at other majors with the same perspective of survival of the fittest, then shouldn't they remove many of the basic subjects like landscape planning and forensic medicine, and replace them with popular majors like economics, management, or computer science? Therefore, this matter caused a huge debate in the school. It was not because of Poplar Fruit, but because the school's teachers and management department had a lot of differences in opinion. Poplar Fruit had not been in a teaching and management position for too long, so he could understand the thoughts of the students, teachers, and the school. However, he was not willing to remove these subjects. Don't underestimate the unpopular languages that had a small audience. Among the students who were really willing to choose, that was where the academic talents gathered. When others were rushing to choose those languages that were easy to learn and had a high demand for employment in order to earn big money after graduation, The students who were willing to immerse themselves in these languages were destined to be strong and focused. Just like great Master Ji, didn't he also tirelessly study Sanskrit for so many years? Didn't his few students also become the backbone of Beijing University or other related research institutes? Although these people were unknown, and although they might not be able to bring high returns to their alma mater in terms of status and finances, they were indeed the pillars of the university. Without them staying in the university to research and teach, the university would have closed its doors long ago. Therefore, Poplar Fruit's suggestion was to maintain the status quo, but not to force the students to choose. If they were willing to choose, then they should persevere. If they were unwilling, then they should not force them. However, Poplar Fruit also proposed an ambitious idea to expand the scale. He felt that it was wrong to limit the Eurasian minor to the scope of foreign languages. All the teachers and students in the school should have the opportunity to choose the minor courses of the Eurasian minor. The reason was very simple. Yang Guo was doing the opposite. He believed that since many students who learned a foreign language ended up doing all kinds of jobs, and even had to relearn new knowledge from work, after all, most of the time, languages were only auxiliary. So why not let those students who were already learning their professional skills also learn a small language? The purpose of learning a minor language was not to let them change their profession to be a translator in the future, but to let them choose a career that was not limited to their own country's company, but to let them join multinational companies or foreign enterprises. That way, with a language that could be used to communicate with foreigners, they would definitely stand at a height that they dared not imagine. Poplar Fruit also drew a new blueprint for the school. After 10, 15, or even more years of accumulation, the school's talents would be favored by foreign enterprises, and even those non-mainstream national enterprises. Once it was graduation season, the school's own job fair would be able to attract local large enterprises from all over the world to come and recruit talents. With this, Higashiyama University, which was heading towards the world and cultivating talents for the world, would be the real rise. Chapter 1502. Poplar Fruit's idea was very good, but of course, the reality was also very harsh. This plan would take a long time to implement, and there were many details that needed to be considered. There were many difficulties, and to realize it was no different from a long march of 108,000 miles. But there was still a need to have an ideal. What if it came true? Although Chen Zongdai was furious before, he felt that Poplar Fruit's idea was to attack the foundation of the School of Foreign Languages, and it was very likely to change the School of Foreign Languages from a major university to a purely auxiliary position like an English teaching center. However, Poplar Fruit still persuaded the old man, because the status of the School of Foreign Languages would not change, but its enrollment position would focus on academic talents and high-level applied talents. Academic talents were like the pedants in the history department, who focused on academic research, and high-level applied talents were to cultivate high-quality translators. Such a change was to change the School of Foreign Languages' current situation of cultivating jack-of-all-trades talents for society. Jack-of-all-trades talents seemed to be able to do any job after graduation, but in fact they were a bit like educated migrant workers, who could not get high wages and excellent social status. Now the School of Foreign Languages was like this. After graduation there were students from all walks of life, but there were very few who could really appeal to society and open up employment channels for their juniors. Even if there were successful people, it was their own excellence and hard work, and their success could not be replicated. For example, the School of Management of Higashiyama University was very good. The students they cultivated walked into many big enterprises, especially accounting. The branches of the four major international accounting firms, PwC, Deloitte, KPMG, Ernst & Young, in South China were almost the world of the School of Management of Higashiyama University. Their success was passed down from generation to generation. Instead of giving up their own specialization and cultivating jack-of-all-trades talents, it was better to focus on professional professors and let the School of Foreign Languages become the cradle of linguists and translators. And sharing and popularizing it would not only make the School of Foreign Languages more outstanding, but also improve the competitiveness of the graduates of the entire school. Of course, Poplar Fruit was not so selfless. He believed that if foreign language learning was made universal in the school, there would be more talents for him to choose from. Poplar Fruit would be overjoyed even if he could get a dozen or so talents in language that he could continue to nurture. Poplar Fruit would try his best to persuade these good seedlings to continue their studies during their postgraduate and doctoral studies, so as to cultivate more linguistic experts for China. Just like him and Chen Zhongdai, they could raise the voice of China in the international association. Of course, all of this was just a beautiful fantasy. Poplar Fruit, Chen Zhongdai, the teachers of the School of Foreign Languages, and the new president of Higashiyama University, who supported their idea, would continue to work hard for this idea in the next few years. But at least they had a direction. Compared to the feeling of crossing the river in school, Yang Guo was much more relaxed in New Translation Road publishing firm. That was because the professional managers of New Translation Road were not school administrators. They only needed Poplar Fruit to give some professional advice. After a few days of research, they came up with a set of countermeasures. Simply put, New Translation Road would take the initiative to help the country implement the support policies. Specifically, they would help those publishing houses that wanted to develop foreign business to find foreign publishing channels. There were 3 reasons why New Translation Road Publishing House was able to dominate the industry before. The first, of course, was inseparable from the translation team led by Poplar Fruit. It was mainly because of the existence of a monster like Poplar Fruit. As the vanguard general of New Translation Road Publishing House, he directly fought for half of New Translation Road's market from scratch. Even today, when New Translation Road had developed and expanded, Poplar Fruit's personal translation sales could reach more than 1/5 of the entire company's sales. It could be seen how great Poplar Fruit's contribution was. The second was that their management team was very outstanding. They could run around discussing business and doing marketing plans. The success of New Translation Road was definitely inseparable from their contributions. The third was the New Translation Road's publishing channel that the industry had always been jealous of. Although New Translation Road started with Amazon, Zheng Yujia had the foresight to jump out of Amazon's shackles. Instead, they relied on their reputation and a group of elites to cooperate with publishers all over the world and open up their own channels. This was something that other publishing houses could not imitate. And now, this plan was to use New Translation Road's channels to support other publishing houses in the country and help them go out. This caused some controversy among the executives. After all, they were sharing their own business with other publishing houses and their competitors so selflessly. No one would be willing to share this with them. You have to look at the long term. As the big boss, Zheng Yujia personally persuaded them. If they looked at the immediate benefits, New Translation Road was indeed not worth it. Moreover, they had cultivated a lot of terrifying opponents for no reason. No matter how they looked at it, it was a losing deal. However, in the long run, New Translation Road could stabilize its position as the industry's leader through this generous performance. It could also gain the support of many publishing houses that were not ambitious. Most importantly, the country would take note of it. Zheng Yujia, who came from a political family, understood this principle the best. Supporting the implementation of the country's policies was equivalent to including New Translation Road, a private company, into the ranks of the country's regular army. New Translation Road, which was rooted in the country, definitely needed the country's favor. Not only was the country's policy tilted, but even when the country formulated new policies in the future, they would also consult New Translation Road, a three-good company, for their opinions. Being able to participate in the formulation of national policies was more valuable than publishing 2 best-selling books for New Translation Road. With the support of the country's policies, cultural exports had become the general trend. Instead of not cooperating, New Translation Road might as well take the initiative. Anyway, the market was so big that it would be difficult to divide the cake no matter how it was divided. The most important point was that New Translation Road also controlled 2 other factors for success. It also controlled Tungsun literature, a killer weapon that provided a steady stream of resources. New Translation Road would definitely not be caught by other latecomers. Of course, Zheng Yujie also said a reason that made Poplar Fruit overjoyed. Taking advantage of this opportunity, New Translation Road could really promote the model of dividing the translators. It could even set up an industry barrier to ensure that translators who contributed greatly could also get their own benefits. This was the importance of having the right to speak. Chapter 1503. The new translation path was progressing forward, and Yangguo would naturally receive more honor and status. But in fact, Poplar Fruit had received too many awards this year. For example, the Hansuing Youth Translation Award that those budding translators looked up to. Poplar Fruit, whose ability had long surpassed his peers, was too embarrassed to participate in such a competition. The more authoritative Gabaoquan Literary Translation Award, which was one of the two major literary translation awards in the country, had listed Poplar Fruit as a favorite since last year. Naturally, Poplar Fruit did not disappoint and won this award at the beginning of this year. And to his surprise, in November, there was news from abroad that the International Translation Federation had also announced that this year's Northern Lights Outstanding Literary Translation Award would be awarded to him. The Gabaoquan Literary Translation Award could not be compared to the Northern Lights Translation Award. The latter was established by the International Translation Federation, also known as the International Translation Federation. It was one of the highest awards in the international translation field. In addition, this award was only given out once every 3 years. Before this, no Chinese scholar had won this award. The reason why it was awarded to Poplar Fruit was not only because Poplar Fruit had translated works for 2 Nobel Prize winners in literature, but also because Poplar Fruit's translation of online novels had caused the Chinese Xuanhuan craze all over the world. More importantly, it was because of Poplar Fruit's academic achievements in the past 2 years. At this level, translation theory was not even presentable. Poplar Fruit's thesis, published by Harvard and Monterey's Language_Learning at the end of last year, was a primer that brought Poplar Fruit to the attention of the International Translation Federation. It couldn't be helped. A theoretical thesis that could reduce the difficulty of learning Chinese was enough to cause a sensation in the academic world. And Poplar Fruit's latest thesis, published in the middle of this year, although it was not published in an authoritative foreign journal, it caused a sensation that foreign scholars could not ignore. If the previous articles were to be said to only reduce the difficulty of learning Chinese, then Yangguo's latest article was to break down the cultural barrier between Chinese and English from both sides. Not only were Chinese language scholars excited, but Western countries also began to pay close attention to it. Even those languages that were closely related to Chinese culture, such as Indonesian and Korean, also sought out Poplar Fruit's articles in an attempt to gain some inspiration from them. The International Translation Union realized that Poplar Fruit's contributions over the past 3 years were indeed worthy of awarding him a Northern Lights Award. The purpose of this award is to promote the development of literary translation, improve the quality of translations, and highlight the important role that translators play in promoting the close unity of people around the world. Wasn't that what Poplar Fruit had done? If he didn't win an award, there would be no justice. The news of Poplar Fruit winning an award caused quite a stir in the Chinese linguistics and translation circles. However, that was all. It was not the time for the award ceremony yet, and the media would not pay attention to such an unpopular award. But this news was enough to attract the attention of the Chinese Translation Association. After all, this award was much more important than the Gabaoquan Award. The Gabaoquan Award was only awarded because of Poplar Fruit's achievements a few years ago. His achievements in the past 2 years had not really been discussed by those big shots yet. It was not that Poplar Fruit was not good, but that Poplar Fruit was too young. It was also because of the issue of age that the International Translation Union took the lead in the Chinese Translation Association. Others had already given Poplar Fruit the highest award. So why were they still looking at the almanac from decades ago? Only then did the authorities realize that the young Poplar Fruit had quietly climbed to a peak that ordinary people could only look up to. The Northern Lights Award. Even some of the old scholars in the Translation Association could not help but be envious of it. But in the end, it was won by a young man. In comparison, they suddenly realized that their decades of experience were not as important as 2 theses written by a child. Should they give Poplar Fruit an award? For example, the China Translation Culture Lifetime Achievement Award. But this award was given to old translators. If a young man went up and won the Lifetime Achievement Award, how could the old translators hide their faces? Of course, there were also people who argued, there is no such thing in the award requirements. Who says that young people can't win awards? How can Poplar Fruit's achievements be worse than those of the previous winners? This person was none other than Poplar Fruit's old friend, Professor Rowling. Although this award had not been decided yet, and Poplar Fruit's qualifications were also very controversial, Poplar Fruit was still mentioned. Even if he did not win the award next year, perhaps the year after next or the year after next, he believed that one day, Poplar Fruit would be able to use his better and better results to gain everyone's support. Outside of work, Poplar Fruit also accompanied Kiki to Beijing because Kiki's birthday was on November 11th. Using this opportunity, the 5 families, except for Fang Beibei who was pregnant and was forbidden from going anywhere by her parents, all gathered in Beijing. This was the first time they had reunited after a month of filming. The little fellows were having a great time. Because the production team had sent a photographer, the audience was lucky enough to see Nuai leading a little white horse, and Chi-Chi sitting on top of it with a smile on her face. In fact, more than a week ago, the 3rd season of Where Are We Going, Daddy? Had already finished airing. But the audience still felt that it was not enough. Especially the emotional last episode, it made the audience's emotions feel like they were on a roller coaster. First, it was the laughter and laughter of the children innocently interacting with the small animals. Then, it was the sadness brought by the off-key but pleasant farewell songs of the fathers before dinner. But after the sadness, it was the 3rd day. Suits, princess dresses, and other luxurious outfits made the 5 family members show their faces one by one. Although every loving moment was a little torturous, poor single children. At the same time, they could feel all kinds of immersive happiness. But the happiness and joy did not last long before it reached the final segment. The 5 families sat together and recalled every detail of their 8 trips. The constantly changing video footage, and everyone's red eyes moved every audience member. But in the end they still said goodbye. And it was a goodbye that did not have the chance to start again. The audience was sad for a long time, and some female audience members even cried a few times. In the end, the production team did not forget to fan the flames by showing the photos of the children's reunion and gathering in Beijing. Oh my God! Don't you know that after seeing these children for a week, actually a month, they have changed quite a bit? Dejun and Kong Kong have chipped their front teeth. Isn't this feeling very unbearable? Yes, the production team wanted everyone to go back and watch the show a few more times. When they parted, they had to do it forcefully because if they saw them again, it might be the last time. No, it should be said that if they met again in the future, these 5 adorable children might not be able to recognize them. Chapter 1504. Even though the outside world was paying attention to Poplar Fruit's life, Poplar Fruit had quietly made a name for himself in his field. In the future, Poplar Fruit, who was more focused on academics, teaching, and public welfare, would be even more brilliant. However, at the end of November, all the glory, fame, media, and fans' attention were cast aside. As for Poplar Fruit's work, he also took half a month off. All his energy was put into Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei's most important event in their lives. Finally, after half a year, Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei finally welcomed their grand wedding. Song Jiwen was very helpful. He helped Poplar Fruit rent a resort in the suburbs of Yangcheng for 4 whole days. The cost was not much. The resort took into account Poplar Fruit's fame, and only charged 200,000 yuan for the rental. There were many benefits to renting a resort. In addition to the wedding banquet, the resort also provided guests from afar, Poplar Fruit's relatives, students who worked in other cities, with luxurious hotel accommodations. All the guests could even enjoy the resort's hot spring service. In the cold winter, being able to soak in a hot spring was definitely the best thing to do. Of course, there was another benefit to the resort. It was spacious. It was not like the previous weddings, where a large group of people were crowded in the hotel lobby. For the wedding, Poplar Fruit spent a lot of money. In addition to booking a resort, ordering a super luxurious wedding banquet, and hiring a professional wedding host team, etc. Poplar Fruit even hired a fleet of cars to pick up the guests at the airport, train station, and other places. As for his wedding car, Poplar Fruit did not have to worry about it. Remember when he bought Lu Dongzhuiyu's national husband from Poplar Fruit? Although Poplar Fruit didn't contact him often, their relationship wasn't bad. Perhaps young Master Wang's father, the richest man in the country, had reminded him of something. Although Poplar Fruit was not a businessman, Poplar Fruit's influence was not bad at all. In the entertainment industry, he could not be compared to an A-list celebrity. He had the additional influence from overseas, and his status in the academic world was unparalleled. He had even shown his face in front of the #1 leader. Such a low-key young talent that no one could ignore, young Master Wang, who had no conflict of interest, was naturally willing to befriend him. So when young Master Wang heard the news, he took the initiative to come to Poplar Fruit and drove 10 luxurious sports cars from his garage. BMW and Mercedes-Benz weren't even on the list. Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, extended Lincoln, and so on were standard. Among them, there was an Aston Martin that was worth more than 40 million. Although this was not young Master Wang's best car, the entire fleet's market value had exceeded 100 million. At first, Poplar Fruit refused. The value of the fleet had frightened him and Fong Beibei. But young Master Wang kept persuading him, and what he said made sense. This was a once-in-a-lifetime wedding, so it had to be a grand one. The rich young Master Wang even patted his chest and said to Poplar Fruit, "Don't worry, the cars are all insured." He didn't say anything inauspicious, but what he meant was that Poplar Fruit could use it as he pleased, and even if the insurance company didn't pay, young Master Wang didn't care about this small amount of money. Poplar Fruit only needed to refuel himself, and if Poplar Fruit didn't have a driver, he could find someone to do it for free. Alright, Poplar Fruit was indeed persuaded by young Master Wang. So, when such a long fleet of supercars appeared on the streets of Yangcheng, the entire city was in an uproar. One had to know that because supercars couldn't run in the city, such luxurious cars were not commonly seen in Yangcheng, a city with many rich people. What's more, they appeared in a group. If it weren't for the fleet's strict adherence to traffic regulations, and the festive wedding stickers on the cars, the traffic police would probably have arrested them halfway. However, such a dazzling motorcade inevitably attracted the attention of the public, especially when it stopped at the traffic light. Weibo and WeChat moments were crazily flooded with these photos. Many people were guessing which big boss had organized this fleet of cars. But soon, paparazzi revealed that this fleet of cars was Poplar Fruit's bridal procession. Instantly, the number of people paying attention increased. People outside of Yangcheng also clicked their tongues in wonder. Why did the paparazzi's information come so quickly? Because Poplar Fruit was still a hot topic in the news, and people's interest in his life had not subsided. Poplar Fruit's wedding had been anticipated by fans since a month ago, so the paparazzi had been asking around for information about Poplar Fruit's wedding arrangements. What made them ecstatic was that Poplar Fruit wasn't like other celebrities who arranged their weddings in beautiful foreign islands like Fiji or Bali. Instead, he chose a domestic venue where they could do whatever they wanted. In fact, after Poplar Fruit booked the resort, the paparazzi already knew about it. So for the past 2 days, it was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Surrounding the resort, because Zhuangzhou helped to find security inside, they couldn't get in. Staring at every guest and identifying them. There was no need to mention the other 4 families whose fathers had gone. They had all arrived at the resort early in the morning. As the little host, Chi-Chi happily received her little friends. There were also many celebrities attending Poplar Fruit's wedding. Celebrities from the entertainment industry who were close to Poplar Fruit were all there, such as Teacher He's 5-man team, Mango TV's producer Xie and village chief Li Rui. The other members of the production team weren't famous. Sister Pomegranate, and director Han Han, Che Injuan, Beast by Ku, and other unexpected creatives. Che Injuan was originally one of Poplar Fruit's groomsmen, and the other friends of Wan Hetiani were technically supposed to call Poplar Fruit boss. What surprised everyone was that Beckham, who was far away in England, also came to Yangcheng with his family. Of course, they didn't stay at the resort, but chose to stay at the hotel booked by the sponsor. Although they were also busy with some business matters, Beckham still smiled and told the reporters that his main purpose in coming to Yangcheng was to attend his good friend Poplar Fruit's wedding. This news made the whole country boil with excitement. Even the Leon fever, Poplar Fruit's English name, which had cooled down in foreign countries, showed signs of rising again because of Beckham's revelation. Of course, in places where the media didn't notice, there were also VIPs from Givenchy quietly arriving in Yangcheng. Ardal, who had become the chief designer of Givenchy, and his granddaughter, Luo Danny, also came to attend their old friend Poplar Fruit's wedding. Chapter 1505. Of course, the reporters paid more attention to the big-name celebrities mentioned earlier. However, other than the celebrities, famous people from all walks of life also received their attention. It was a bit like a guessing game. They happily stayed at the entrance of the resort and examined every guest that came and went. They wanted to see if they could find more important people from Poplar Fruit's group of relatives and friends who were invited to the wedding banquet. The netizens also liked to watch. Their curiosity was very strong. In the end, they found out that there really were people. Most of them were from the academic world. For example, Luo Lin and the other professors who had appeared on TV through lecture room were easily recognized. Although they were a bit like has-been celebrities that no one cared about, don't underestimate the power of the paparazzi. As for the other important people who couldn't be recognized, for example, Dean Qishan of Beijing International University's College of Advanced Studies, Professor Yuan Xinlin of Beijing University, Professor Liu Shufeng of Shuimu University, etc. Although the outside world knew nothing about these people, they were well-known figures in the academic world. Needless to say, the professors from Higashiyama University in Yangcheng didn't appear in public so early. Anyway, it was very close and they could rush over on the same day. The paparazzi posted the photos online, and the students from their respective universities identified them. Suddenly, it caused a lot of exclamations. Everyone knew that Poplar Fruit was amazing, but how amazing was Poplar Fruit? It was difficult for outsiders to have an intuitive idea. However, seeing so many big names in the academic world come to support Poplar Fruit, everyone understood that Poplar Fruit was definitely not a nobody. Even the rising stars were not worthy of his fame. He was already a superstar. Otherwise, why would so many influential people come to Yangcheng to attend his wedding banquet? Even if they were on good terms with him, these big names didn't need to lower themselves to please a junior. Therefore, the situation could only mean one thing. Either Poplar Fruit had a strong background, or Poplar Fruit was really amazing. The former was obviously impossible. After years of digging by the media, the world knew what kind of background Poplar Fruit had. Moreover, Poplar Fruit's teacher was only the dean of Higashiyama University. Therefore, Poplar Fruit was really amazing. He was so amazing that many big names wanted to please him. Other than the academic world, people from the gaming world also came. There was no need to mention Uncle Tiger from Huaishue. This guy wasn't famous. What really made everyone excited were the three big names from Blizzard from the United States. The usually low-key Alan, Mike and several other big bosses also appeared at the resort. They didn't have any relationship with Poplar Fruit. It was settled a few years ago. However, their friendship with Poplar Fruit had been maintained. However, when it came to Hearthstone, which had become Blizzard's flagship game, they should also show respect and gratitude to Poplar Fruit and Fong Bei, who accidentally created it. Therefore, the appearance of Alan, Mike and the others made the domestic Blizzard fans excited. At this time, they remembered that the Hearthstone that they played every day after dinner was the work of a Chinese couple. Of course, they should be called husband and wife now. Now, after several years, Hearthstone was finally at the peak of its development. There were all kinds of leagues, and its creators had ended their love run and started to write their own happy lives. We're all old. Some forum moderators introduced it in such a sentimental way. Many fans were moved to tears. Well, let's not talk about that. Apart from the big names that everyone paid attention to, there were also many people that the paparazzi didn't notice or didn't even appear in their field of vision. For example, people from the political world kept a low profile. For example, the county magistrate from Poplar Fruit's hometown, Chen Longjiang, who was already working in Guishan province, but had a deep personal relationship with Poplar Fruit. Thanks to Poplar Fruit, he was already sitting on the mayor's throne. Uncle Jean from Guangdong province's education department, and so on. There were also people from the military world, such as Jing Zhuo, Meng Sanhua, Yang Zhengdong, the Xiong brothers, and so on. They were all present. However, these people from the military and political world knew that Poplar Fruit's wedding banquet was bound to be watched. Therefore, those who came from other places chose to stay outside. In the end, they sat in the car sent by Poplar Fruit and went directly to the wedding banquet. Moreover, they didn't sit in the main hall. Poplar Fruit chose a few luxurious rooms to entertain them. As for those with higher ranks, such as the director of the Public Security Department, Yan Wanxiong, or Zheng Yujia's father, of course they wouldn't come. However, they all called Poplar Fruit to congratulate him. Zheng Mingxing's attitude towards Poplar Fruit had always been a bit strange. He wasn't like Zheng Yujia's mother, who had always been hostile towards Poplar Fruit. Instead, he admired Poplar Fruit and had always respected Poplar Fruit's academic achievements. Of course, he didn't give Poplar Fruit any help. He watched Poplar Fruit's growth from an outsider's perspective. He always felt that it was very interesting. However, it was undeniable that because of the mysterious relationship between Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujia, Zheng Mingxing wouldn't be nice to Poplar Fruit. After all, although Poplar Fruit was a good man, he had delayed his daughter's youth and put Zheng Yujia in a position to fight against the family. However, Poplar Fruit didn't appreciate it. If it weren't for Zheng Mingxing's admiration for Poplar Fruit would have died a terrible death. Therefore, it was precisely because of this strange attitude that Zheng Mingxing suddenly called to congratulate Poplar Fruit. This made Poplar Fruit feel flattered and nervous for a long time. It couldn't be helped. Not long ago, the daughter of a provincial party secretary almost became his mistress. How could Poplar Fruit not panic? In addition to these famous people, the rest were relatives, classmates, and friends of Poplar Fruit and Fang Beibei. They were the main force among the guests. These days, the resort village was filled with their laughter. However, why would the paparazzi care about these ordinary people who weren't famous? Just as they gradually couldn't find any interesting new discoveries, a bus slowly drove over. The children who got off the bus with pairs of bright and curious eyes made them cheer again. It was the children from Xiong family village. Although they couldn't recognize them, they could guess that they were the children from the mountain areas that Poplar Fruit did charity. Sister Xiaolin, Brother Xiaofeng, Brother Anchuan. Kiki cheered and welcomed them happily with Nuai and a few of her friends. In the middle of the team was Luo Danny, the little princess of France. The little girl was overjoyed. During this time, it was like a festival for her. Many of her friends came to play with her. Let me introduce you all. You are all my good friends. Under Kiki's introduction, the children who didn't have the distinction of rich and poor quickly integrated. Chapter 1506. Vroom vroom vroom. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, an Aston Martin motorcade drove over in a flashy manner. The colorful and dazzling cars almost blinded everyone's eyes. Of course, it was also because the roads in the Shainan district of Yangqing were too narrow that the motorcade drove very slowly, giving the crowd the opportunity to stop and watch. The unique roar of the sports car's exhaust pipe was almost like a symphony of bass bubbles. This kind of sound, in the ears of car lovers, wasn't inferior to the classical music performed by a top international orchestra. However, this was actually used by Yang Guo and the others to replace the firecrackers that were commonly seen in wedding cars. Yangqing didn't allow firecrackers and fireworks. Moreover, no one would bear to set off firecrackers in a sports car that was worth millions or even tens of millions. Therefore, the quick-witted Prince Wang came up with this idea. Whether it looked like it or not, it was very flashy. He summoned all the people in the small town. "Wife, come out and see God." The effect was no less than what Wu Mengda had said in the Moonlight Cache. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the car stopped on a road. The drivers naturally stayed in the car. A few people carrying large cameras ran out of the 3 convertible sports cars. They were professional cameramen who had been borrowed from Mango TV to help with the program. Of course, Poplar Fruit still paid for it. However, it was also because Poplar Fruit had a good relationship with Mango TV and the basic staff of the program. Otherwise, even if he had the money, he wouldn't have been able to borrow them. As if rehearsed, the doors of the 5 cars behind opened at the same time with a click. 5 groomsmen in black suits walked out. Look at their exquisite high-end suits and shiny hair. They all had different hairstyles. Even without looking at their faces, one would think that they were all more handsome than the other. Of the 5 groomsmen, the one in the lead was of course Yangguo's lifelong best friend, Song Jiwen. I don't know if there's a custom where groomsmen can only be unmarried, but I'll just pretend there isn't. He was the main groomsman, and he even had Yangguo's wedding ring in his pocket. The second one was young Master Wang, who had joined in the fun with a sneaky smile. Young Master Wang had attended many celebrity weddings this year. Although he liked to flaunt his wealth in the past few years, he had been working hard to improve his image and expand his network. Of course, he didn't threaten Poplar Fruit to provide him with the opportunity to be the best man. However, since he proposed it, Poplar Fruit agreed. It was not a big deal. Moreover, Child Wang's personality was not bad, and he got along well with Poplar Fruit. However, he didn't know if the reporters would reveal that young Master Wang had taken the time out of his busy schedule to be Poplar Fruit's groomsman. Would that become the topic of gossip again? That was a story for another time. Young Master Wang wasn't the main point. He was just a bystander. Let's look at the groomsmen behind him. The third one was Cheonjuan. This was not surprising. Although Cheonjuan was a celebrity, he had always had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit. Naturally, he would not be absent from this important event in Poplar Fruit's life. The fourth one was a little too big. Fat Dragon. This guy's company was not doing well. Other than a few best-selling games, it had been declining for the past 2 years. However, the money they earned was still enough for them to spend. These guys did not have much need for money. Instead, they focused on their skills, so they didn't care. However, as Poplar Fruit's best friend when he was young, and as a relative and brother when he grew up, Fat Dragon was definitely qualified to be Poplar Fruit's best man. As for the fifth person, it was no surprise that it was Wang Yuba. Although Wang Yuba still called Poplar Fruit his teacher in school, after he started working, he was a good helper to Poplar Fruit. He and Lin Xingshan managed the charity fund very well. Of course, as Fang Beibei's best friend, Lin Xingshan was definitely going to be the bridesmaid. Her partner, Wang Yuba, was naturally going to be the best man. Naturally, it was very interesting. As the fifth best man, Wang Yuba's relationship with Poplar Fruit was not the furthest. In fact, the order of the best men had nothing to do with their relationship. Song Jiwen wanted to get the wedding ring, so he stood first without a doubt. Wang Yuba was the youngest, so naturally, he was the last best man who often had to run errands and do this and that. The best man's appearance was still not bad. Except for Fat Dragon, the other four were considered handsome. Song Jiwen was already very handsome. In terms of appearance, Poplar Fruit was a little worse than him. Needless to say, Cheonjuan had an evil charm with his aquiline nose. Wang Yuba was not bad either. He was still the most handsome in the past. Therefore, the appearance of the five best men gave a great visual impact to the onlookers. Then, when they welcomed the groom in the white suit from the second Lincoln limousine, all eyes were attracted to him. There was a beautiful man in the southern kingdom. His appearance was as beautiful as a fairy. His clothes were whiter than snow. He was elegant and handsome. White clothes were not something that ordinary people could wear. But who was Poplar Fruit? 3 years ago, he was a new model who dominated the Bali Fashion Week. Today, Poplar Fruit, in addition to his handsome figure, also had a calm and elegant temperament. He was wearing a white suit. Not only did no one feel that it was out of place, but the golden dragon embroidery on the sleeves made him look like a noble gentleman. No wonder the girls and aunties in the small town were stunned. Although Poplar Fruit, who always refused to put on makeup, was still barefaced today, People were in high spirits. The groom was also jubilant today. He smiled until his face was flushed. It was like the peach blossoms on each other's faces. Of course, the good things had just begun. Surrounded by the 5 best men in black suits, Poplar Fruit smiled as he took a big bouquet of flowers from the Aston Martin in front of him. The 99 roses were so big that Poplar Fruit had to hold them with both hands. Wrapped in pink lace, the outer layer was a bright sky full of stars. In the middle, there were 99 red roses in the shape of a heart, bright as fire. There were also some contrasting white roses in the middle. The white roses formed the word "I love you." Of course, the word "love" was a small heart shape. Child Wang took out a big stack of red envelopes from his pocket that Poplar Fruit had prepared. It seemed to be suitable for him to keep them. The red envelopes were long strips of red envelopes that were a little bigger than 100 yuan when spread out. Each one was stuffed to the brim. It looked very visually shocking. The function of the red envelopes was needless to say. They were the bridesmaids who firmly protected or detained the bride in the palm of their hands. They were the bridesmaids who needed to break through the key points and successfully rescue the bride. Seeing that everyone was ready, Poplar Fruit waved happily. "Brothers, let's go." It was time to pick up the bride. Chapter 1507. Feng Beibei's house was in the alley behind the shop on the street. The car couldn't drive in, so Poplar Fruit walked into the alley, surrounded by a group of groomsmen. At this time, the small alley was already crowded. Feng Beibei's neighbors came out to join in the fun. Of course, there were also some Feng Beibei's relatives. They stayed behind to support Feng Beibei. Later, besides the bridesmaids and groomsmen, Feng Beibei's parents would sit in the bridal escort team. The others would sit in the reception team behind, or drive their own cars to the wedding banquet together. Because it was overcrowded, Poplar Fruit and the others cupped their hands and smiled along the way, passing through the middle of the crowd. These onlooking neighbors didn't have a big red packet, but Poplar Fruit wasn't so stingy. The little brothers who followed him ran in front and back, carrying baskets full of small red packets and giving them out one by one. The money was not much. It was just a small red packet of 10 yuan. It was only enough to buy 2 bottles of water at the moment. However, it was still a token of the groom's appreciation. Everyone accepted it with satisfaction. They smiled and congratulated. "Congratulations, congratulations." Under the care of the onlooking neighbors, they deliberately made a path for Poplar Fruit and the others to pass through the crowded alley neatly. But the real test had just begun. The door of the courtyard below was closed, but they could hear that Feng Beibei's nieces and nephews were laughing nonstop. "Quick, pick up the bride." Song Jiwen ran over and knocked on the door as a pawn. "Do you think you can pick up the bride just because you say so? Who knows if you are impersonating? What if you pick up the wrong person?" Everyone was sweating when they heard this. How could there be impersonators in the bridal escort team? This wasn't a period drama where the wrong bridal sedan chair was married to the right man. Moreover, the girl who shouted, "Chen Anlin, is it appropriate for you to argue with your husband like this? Then what do you suggest we do?" Song Jiwen laughed. He also heard his wife's voice. However, Chen Anlin was originally the bridesmaid of Feng Beibei. This restless little pepper had slipped down. "What should we do? Sisters, what do you think we should do?" Chen Anlin seemed to be instigating the atmosphere among Feng Beibei's female relatives. He heard the giggles of a large group of Orioles, and then shouted in unison, "Of course we have to show our appreciation." Fortunately, we were prepared. Poplar Fruit smiled and waved his hand. There was no need for Poplar Fruit to do it himself. The tall and strong Cheonjuan took out 2 large stacks of red envelopes from the 2 inner pockets of his suit. They were slightly smaller than the ones in Child Wang's hands. But the amount was not small. There were 200 renminbi in 1 red packet. Cheonjuan did not hesitate. He stuffed about 20 stacks of red packets through the lock on the big iron door. Song Jiwen shouted, "Count them. Is it enough to share? If it's not enough, we have more." Hee hee hee. It was a mess inside. It seemed like they were snatching red packets. However, Chen Anlin did not participate. She was there to cause trouble. She shouted, Not enough, not enough. Not enough, we have more. Song Jiwen took another stack from Fat Dragon and stuffed it in. However, at this time there was gradually no sound. Hey, can you say something? Song Jiwen asked in confusion. Oh. There was no movement. There was only the sound of whispers. Fortunately, before the groom and groomsmen could get impatient, the door was unlocked. Then, with a creak, it was pulled open by two young girls who were covering their mouths and laughing. The Fong family's courtyard was not big, and they planted flowers. Usually, only Father Fong's car could be parked, and Poplar Fruit's car could only be parked outside. But later, Poplar Fruit paid for his parents-in-law to buy the nearby land and refurbish it. Now the courtyard looked very spacious. However, it was still full of people. They were all Fong Beibei's relatives, and most of them were the younger generation who had come to watch the show. They were laughing and sizing up Poplar Fruit, and the others who had just entered. Especially the cameramen who were carrying cameras. They were all curiously stared at by the children. With so many people, Poplar Fruit's red packet was actually not enough. However, just now, it was Chun Anlin who made things difficult for Poplar Fruit and the others. The Fong family's relatives were very satisfied with this son-in-law. Hello, auntie, little sister. Poplar Fruit greeted the relatives on both sides. Although they were not familiar with each other, after all, they were a family. Poplar Fruit had done a lot of studying. All right, don't waste your time here with us. An auntie who was more important in the Fong family laughed and said, "Come in quickly. Your parents-in-law are waiting for you." Poplar Fruit quickly nodded and gestured to her, then walked straight to the door of the house. The 5 groomsmen behind him slowed down and stood slightly outside the door, like door gods. Poplar Fruit had to face it alone. Poplar Fruit did not hesitate and gently pushed the door open. Originally, the living room had a sofa and a coffee table as usual. However, at this moment, the original furniture had been pushed to the side. Facing the door, there was an antique square table and 2 old-fashioned armchairs. Father Fong, who was wearing a red tang suit, and Mother Fong, who was wearing a cheongsam, were sitting in front. This was the wish of the elderly. As Poplar Fruit and Fong Beibei were more inclined to have a Western wedding, while the elderly were more traditional, they still followed Chinese customs when picking up the bride. Poplar Fruit walked in and knelt down respectfully. He kowtowed to his parents-in-law and said, "Dad, Mom, I'm here to pick up Beibei." Some people would say, "What era is it now? Why are you kowtowing to others?" But in reality, kowtowing did not mean that you were groveling and servile. Kowtowing also represented gratitude and respect. This was the custom here, and Poplar Fruit was willing to kowtow. After all, he was taking away the daughter that they had raised for more than 20 years. Poplar Fruit, who was also his father, understood how it felt. But Mr. and Mrs. Fong did not want to torture Poplar Fruit like before. They were polite, so they quickly let Poplar Fruit stand up. Mr. Fong asked Poplar Fruit to stand beside him and gently patted his hand. "Poplar Fruit, I'm very happy that you called me Dad," Mr. Fong said with a smile on his face. "Because actually I'm very relieved to hand my daughter over to you. When you first came here, your mom..." He pointed to Mrs. Fong, who was next to him with tears in her eyes, and said, "She was impatient and did not let you in. She even made you stand outside for a day and a night." Poplar Fruit quickly said, "It's okay, Dad. Let's not talk about this anymore." He was mainly afraid that the elderly would feel awkward. After all, Mr. and Mrs. Fong were very cruel at that time and left Poplar Fruit outside. They even almost broke up the couple. "I'm going home tonight." Fortunately, Xiaohan finished writing the ending of the novel last night. He will probably finish the novel on the first day of the Lunar New Year. In order to make everyone happy, I will release the ending on the first day of the Lunar New Year. Finally, I hope everyone will recommend and vote for me. Chapter 1508. It's okay to talk about it. Father Fong patted the back of Poplar Fruit's hand and smiled. "I know you don't blame us. At that time, you stood outside for an entire night. Beibei also cried in her room for an entire night." Father Fong sighed. "At that time, We felt that you really loved my daughter. The only regret was your identity back then, right? There was a knot in your heart that you couldn't let go of. Poplar Fruit nodded. He could understand how Father Fong felt. If it were him, Poplar Fruit wouldn't be willing to let Kiki be someone else's stepmother. We didn't care about your reputation or your money. We just hoped that my daughter could find a man who truly loved her and cared for her, Father Fong said. Back then we tested and criticized you for this purpose. Bebe is very straightforward and naive. Sometimes she's very stubborn. Although she doesn't have any bad intentions, when she's stubborn, it's hard to tolerate her. Father Fong said. I know that you always gave in to her and protected her when we quarreled at home. We all know how hard you've worked for the past few years. Actually, Poplar Fruit and Fong Bebe didn't quarrel much. The two of them loved each other like an old married couple. But just like what Father Fong said, when they really quarreled, Fong Bebe's temper wasn't small. The two of them almost broke down from their quarrel. But because they cared about each other, they reconciled in the end. Now that the two of you are going to be a real family, you have to continue living well. Life is a matter between the two of you. Communicate more about the big and small matters. If she's in the wrong, you tell her directly. When she's stubborn, you give in to her. After that, you can slowly communicate with her. She'll understand on her own. Father Fong rambled on, as if he had a lot to say. In fact, this was just another way that parents couldn't bear to part with their daughter when it was time to marry her off. This kind of sincere emotion was deep in his heart, and it was also revealed in his every word and every action. Fong Bebe's mother had been crying for a long time. Although the wedding was just a ceremony, marrying off a daughter in modern times did not mean a permanent separation. On the contrary, because they lived close to each other, Fong Bebe could come home often. However, only parents would be able to understand this kind of mixed feelings. Dad, Mom, don't worry, I will always be good to Bebe. Poplar Fruit's eyes were a little red, he said loudly. Good, good. With your words, we can rest assured that you will take care of our daughter. Mr. Fong felt a lump in his throat. He patted Poplar Fruit's hand and pointed upstairs. Go. Father Fong choked on his sobs and couldn't say anything else. Poplar Fruit bowed deeply to the two old men, and then began to walk upstairs. Outside the door, Song Jiwen and the other groomsmen quickly followed. They didn't take off their shoes. They didn't need to take off their shoes today. The first floor was over, and the second floor was full of fun. Fong Bebe had already put on her makeup and a custom-made wedding dress in the bedroom. However, Poplar Fruit, who was in a hurry, couldn't see her, because she had been detained in the bedroom by Chen Anlin, Lin Xingshan, and the other bridesmaids. Kiki Nui Nina, and Xian Xian, the four flower girls, were also hiding in the bedroom, giggling. Fong Bebe's bridesmaids were also her best friends, Chen Anlin, Lin Xingshan, Lu Lei, and Lu Ruhua. The fifth bridesmaid was Fong Bebe's best friend from university, a girl named Wang Yiru. Wang Yiru had gone to America to study in university, and now she was developing her career in America. However, this time, because of Fong Bebe's wedding, she came all the way back from America. However, Wang Yiru wasn't gentle. She was also a carefree girl, and quickly got along well with everyone. At this time, she also shamelessly stuck her head out from the crack of the door, and giggled. Brother-in-law, hurry up and give me the red packet. Behind her, she couldn't stop giggling. Even Lin Xingshan, who usually spoke softly, shouted loudly, If you don't give us the red packet, then leave the bride to us to be the wife of the fort. After saying that, they laughed and played together again. In the room, Fong Bebe sat on the bed and giggled. She looked at her 5 best friends, and the 4 little ones, who didn't want to be left out, mingled together. Although she really wanted to see Poplar Fruit, and also hoped that Poplar Fruit could see her beautiful appearance, she didn't have the slightest intention of helping her husband solve his problems because of the extortion of her sisters. She was now pregnant. Actually, it was only slightly more than 2 months, and it was just a little obvious. She should just sit back and watch the show calmly. Wait, don't be so quick to use the real thing. Song Jiwen quickly stopped Child Wang. He had experienced it once before, so he was very experienced. The few of them took out a stack of red packets from Fat Dragon that they didn't give out at the door. Poplar Fruit took it, and stuffed it through the crack of the door. He smiled and said, "Here are the red packets. Let us in to pick up the bride." However, after receiving the red packets, they locked the door first, and then shouted loudly, "Hurry, hurry up, sisters, open the red packets quickly. I want one too, I want one too." Kiki and the other little ones also shouted. "Hey, can you guys keep a low profile? We're still outside. We can hear you." Song Jiwen knocked on the door and shouted. "We like it. What can you do?" Chun Anlin didn't give her husband any face at all. "Why are there so few?" Seeing that there were only a few red packets in the red packets, the bridesmaids were dissatisfied and shouted, "So stingy. Don't open it, don't open it. How dare you fool us? Poplar fruit, don't take out the big red packets. Don't even think about getting married today." Under their instigation, the little ones also jumped and shouted, "Big red packets, big red packets." Poplar fruit took the big red packets from Child Wang this time, and stuffed them in one after another. "How much is it this time? Open it." After opening the red packets, they screamed happily, "Wow, there's so much. How much money is there? 1, 2, 3, 38, 39. 39 meant forever. We're rich." There was laughter inside again. "Sisters, can you open the door?" Poplar fruit asked helplessly. However, at this time, Kiki seemed to have turned into a scammer. She said, But we haven't." 5 big red packets were stuffed in, enough for the 5 bridesmaids, but the little ones didn't get any. "Why do little kids need red packets?" Song Jiwen laughed. "What little kids?" Chun Anlin said unhappily. "Yes, that's right, everyone here is one of us." Lu Ruhua shouted loudly, "Hurry up and give us the red packets. Give us the big red packets. We still have 4 little friends." Chapter 1509. Hee. Kiki had completely betrayed her dearest father and joined a group of bandit aunties. She led her friends in an uprising. "We want red packets, big red packets." Thank goodness they were prepared. Poplar fruit gritted his teeth and sighed. He waved his hand and took the last stack of red packets from Child Wang. He said in a pleading tone, "This should be enough, right? I don't have any more." They had the money, but they did not have enough red packets. How could they stuff an endless amount of red packets into their pockets? Chun Anlin smiled proudly and distributed the red packets to the cheerful flower girls. He said, "That's enough. Aya, look at how scared you are. We're not bandits." "That's not what you said when you asked for red packets." "Then open the door quickly," Song Jiwen shouted. Young Master Wang stood at the back. Today was an eye-opener for him. In the past, when he attended weddings, he only saw polite people or businessmen who pretended to be cultured. When had he ever seen someone make things difficult for the groom? Therefore, as a spectator, he did not say anything and just watched happily. It's not that simple. Chun Anlin turned into a demon king this time. He led the bridesmaids to stop the groom and the best man from attacking. "You took the red packets. What's wrong?" Song Jiwen shouted. "Why are you in such a hurry? Are you the groom or is Poplar Fruit the groom? Go away." Little Pepper was still unforgiving even though she was married. She shouted fiercely, "Poplar Fruit is not in a hurry." Poplar Fruit had no choice but to do it himself. He walked up and smiled. "All right, Anlin. What do you need? Just tell me." 2 murmurs could be heard from inside. Soon the discussion was over. Chun Anlin's voice came again. "You gave the red packets. Material gratitude is not bad, but what about the spirit? Why don't I see any gratitude from you?" In terms of material things, how could he be grateful? This was clearly asking for a bribe. Poplar Fruit shook his head and asked, "All right, what do you want? Tell me." As soon as he said that, Wang Yiru shouted impatiently, "Sing for us." However, her mouth was immediately covered. It seemed that the bridesmaids did not expect Wang Yiru to make such a request. "What's wrong?" Child Wang asked in a low voice as he looked at Song Jiwen and the others who had suddenly become flustered. Fat Dragon turned his head expressionlessly, looking like he had nothing left to live for. He stretched out his 2 big hands, covered his ears and whispered, "Later, you'd better cover your ears too." When Poplar Fruit heard this, he glared at them in annoyance. He felt that his singing was not so bad that everyone had to cover their ears. He turned around and asked, "Then what do you want me to sing?" Wang Yiru wiped away the cold sweat on her forehead. Only now did she realize that other people needed money to sing, but Poplar Fruit's singing was life-threatening. Of course, there were also a lot of exaggerations, but the words spoken were like water spilled out, and it was too late for regrets. The bridesmaids could only let Wang Yiru continue to be willful. "Just sing Sister Na's Conquer." Wang Yiru thought for a moment, then added, "Just sing the 2 classic lines." Poplar Fruit understood what the other party meant. He thought for a moment, then opened his mouth and sang, "Conquered by you just like that, cut off all my escape routes, my heart is firm, my decision is wise." Poplar Fruit changed the lyrics himself. "Conquered by you just like that, turned into a stupid pig for you, my heart is clear, my love is captive to you." Although it was improvised, Poplar Fruit's lyrics were very affectionate. Therefore, even though Poplar Fruit's singing was not good, the bridesmaids still shouted in envy. "So amazing! So talented! Bebe, you're so lucky. Ahem, can we open the door now?" Poplar Fruit asked. No. How could they be satisfied so quickly? The bridesmaids shouted again. "You only sang for Bebe, you haven't sung for us yet. Then what should we sing?" Poplar Fruit scratched his head and asked. "No matter what you sing, just make us laugh." This voice was Lu Ruhua's, and she laughed. Yang Guo's eyes lit up. He got some inspiration from Lu Ruhua's voice. Immediately he opened his mouth and said, "I'm Lao Jie, I'm from the village, I'm a local sheep." Puffed. Suddenly everyone laughed. Even the cameraman almost couldn't hold his camera. No one thought that Poplar Fruit would do such a thing. This song, or the Hong Kong version of Ton Air, started from a comedy movie, Charlotte's Trouble. Later, in order to promote his new movie, Andy Lau actually sang this song. Poplar Fruit's Mandarin was super standard, but it didn't mean that he couldn't imitate the Hong Kong accent. These few verses he sang really well. Child Wang laughed so hard that he had to support himself against the wall to stand still. He was very familiar with this song. The movie that was popular in China in the middle of the year was produced by Wanda. Inside, the northeastern Lu Ruhua was also laughing hard. "Ayo, Poplar Fruit, you're so funny." This Hong Kong joke, he really didn't get tired of it even after playing it for a year. "Is this okay?" Yang Guo asked anxiously. He had already tried so hard to sing, so shamelessly imitating the Hong Kong people. Could it be that the difficulty of picking up the bride was going to continue endlessly? Ahem. The eldest sister Chun Anlin calmed down first. She coughed lightly and said, "Open the door." The door to the bride's bedroom was opened, and the first thing they saw were the 5 beautiful bridesmaids dressed in the same light pink gowns. Of course, there were also the little ones in the middle who kept blinking their curious eyes. "Daddy!" Chi-Chi ran over happily, as if she wasn't the one who had tricked her father just now. Hee. Poplar Fruit patted his daughter, who was also very beautiful in the princess dress. He naturally wouldn't argue with the little girl, but today's main character wasn't Kiki. "Wait a moment." Chun Anlin led the 5 bridesmaids to the door and said, "We have something to say." As if rehearsed, they said one sentence after another. "Although you passed our test, you will also successfully pick up the bride. But you have to remember, always be good to our Bebe. You can't relax your expectations of yourself after marrying her home. We will always be watching you." They said it very smoothly, and it felt quite funny to hear them say one sentence after another. Poplar Fruit didn't dare to laugh. He nodded and said, Of course. Finally, after going through a lot of hardships, Poplar Fruit finally walked in. With just a slight turn, he saw his bride smiling shyly under the beautiful wedding dress. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.